Okay, we are live and welcome to the John Riley Project. And boy, we have a guest today here in the JRP podcast studio, back for the second return visit, third time on the podcast.
Correct.
I think we had to do a Zoom interview because it was during the heat of COVID.
Yeah, we did.
But Pete Murray, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, John. This is awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. This is great. It's a great service to the community.
Right on. So thanks for coming on board here, and just really looking forward to kind of catching up and learning more about your campaign for judge. And
yes,
I mean, the election's coming up soon, right?
Really soon. Really soon. Mail-in ballots, which everyone will receive. By the new law, they will appear May 9th or 10th will be in your mailbox. So do the numbers. It's about 2 weeks away.
Okay. Wow. So, I had this. I got this in the mail.
Yeah.
But you're not in here. This, I think, is just some of the state positions, perhaps.
Yeah. Those are the state positions. You'll get your actual ballot. I would assume the county pamphlet will be sent either in the same packet or at the same time, but there will be a county pamphlet that will have all the candidates who are running in every seat that will appear on your ballot.
Okay.
Should be in that county. This is the larger statewide ballot.
Okay, understood.
Or the statewide issues that are in that first pamphlet.
But it's June 7th, so I see the date.
June 7th is the primary, and like I said, we're actually, I'm learning this stuff on the politics side. We're treating May 10th as kind of really end date, because the expectation, who knows if this is accurate or not, is that the election will be essentially over by the middle of May. Now, we won't be counted, but most people will have received their ballot and done whatever they're going to do with it by roughly the middle of May. Maybe some hold on to actually deliver it on June 7th to the voting polling places. Others will mail them in. But those decisions will probably be made by the middle of May. So time is running short.
Right. I think it's like 3/4 of voters are mail-in or absentee, or it's actually probably more.
Right.
Now that they're mailing ballots to everybody.
Yeah,
right?
every single, that's the new law that, they did that during COVID, and now they've made it permanent. So every single voter will receive their ballot in their mailbox.
Okay. Okay. So we are doing this as a live stream. That means that our viewers and listeners online can share comments and questions on YouTube or Facebook. Just type them in. We'll see them up here on our screen. And Pete, I'm sure, will be happy to answer some of those. But, before we kind of get into some of the, the hotter issues of the day, maybe you can just bring us up to speed on your backstory, your history, your career, and what's led you to this point.
Sure. Well, I'm trying to get quicker at this. I've got a fairly lengthy and varied background, but it starts coming out of New York, New Jersey area, where I was born. Went to college down at Duke University on a Navy ROTC scholarship. It was the only way I could afford to go to college. My parents, maybe even to go back further, I'm very proud of this, by the way. My grandfather came over on a boat in 1910. I think I actually have his, the docket that showed him on the boat, that he came over from Ireland with, and you had to register. He had $12 in his pocket. And that's how the Murray story began in this wonderful country. So he comes, he's lands in New York, sleeps on a cousin's floor, as far as, the stories go. Got married, and my father was born. My father was never went beyond high school, served in World War II, landed at Normandy and fought at San Lo, and he's still alive to this day at 98.5 years old.
Really?
Yeah, it's an incredible. So he's, he raised 6 kids. I was one of 6. I was the first to go to college and graduate. 2 of my brothers eventually also got their college degrees. We came from a very modest upbringing. My dad, provided for the 6 of us, and that was it. So I knew I had to find a different path. I accepted the ROTC scholarship, went to Duke, was commissioned literally the day after graduation, or maybe even the day before, in the United States Navy. And 2 weeks later, I showed up at flight school, which I had been selected for. So I Finished flight school a year later, flew for the Navy 8 years, and decided it was that I might follow that dream I had as a high school kid and actually try to go to law school after all. So I left the Navy and went back east. I was fortunate enough to get into Duke University School of Law, where I attended. And after that, I had the opportunity to come out here with a major international law firm. They really wanted me in the LA office. I cut a deal saying I'd really rather be back in that place I found in the Navy, namely San Diego. So they let me come to San Diego, practice there for 2 years in business litigation. After a couple of years, I knew I needed to be on my feet a bit more. So I went over to the district attorney's office, fortunate enough to be hired, and worked as a DA for 12 years, handled hundreds of cases, tried over 75 to 100 to trial, 75 plus to jury, on and on, tried everything you can do in a DA's office, from DUIs and petty thefts to homicides and sexual assaults and child abuse issues and a lot of elder abuse. After 12 years, I wanted to try something else. I guess I get antsy after a decade or so. And I opened my own law practice and did that for 8 years. And I practiced all over the state. I did everything from some civil litigation, a lot of criminal litigation, some defense work. I represented cops quite a bit, cops and other first responders who were facing issues, did probate litigation, family law, juvenile law. So I really covered all the bases. That's of some relevance here because the courts are not just criminal courts. So the San Diego County Superior Court has 5 main divisions, and I practiced in all 5 of them. So after those 8 years, I got a call from the Attorney General's office. I was not looking for a job, and I told them I wasn't looking for a job, but I knew someone there, and they said, look, we really need someone with greater trial experience than what we have. I said, look, I can talk to anybody. I did. And well, when all was said and done, I decided that was a good move to make. So I went back to government service, this time for the state California Attorney General. And I prosecuted, I did both civil prosecutions, but also criminal prosecutions. Most of it was criminal in major healthcare fraud and elder abuse. Did that for 10.5 years until December 31st of 2021. And decided it was time to move on. See, there's that decade thing again, I guess.
Right.
And I was literally putting together with a plan with this law firm that I'm now currently with through the month of January of this year. And the firm is Cajun Miles, primarily a family law outfit. But they were looking for someone to come in who had the trial experience, that could work with their lawyers in strategizing, preparing for courtroom work, helping them with a lot of the skills I'd picked up over all these years in evidence code and court procedures and really just being in a courtroom. And I thought that sounded like a great idea and something I'd really like to do, work with younger lawyers, more inexperienced lawyers, and kind of develop with them. So I literally was starting that. And on January 31st of this year, I got a call from a judge in the Superior Court, Judge Joe Brannigan, been on the bench about 20 years, known him for 25 years. Judge Joe asked me if I would consider running. I said, no, there's an open seat that I knew of. There's one other open, there's now 2, but one open seat. I knew that a gentleman, Mike Murphy, was already positioning himself. I said, Judge, I'm not interested. I'm starting this new position. It's really exciting to me. We're going to expand some practice areas, and we can talk about that a little bit later of some things that we're working on. But Judge Joe, as everyone calls him, says, well, Pete, what if another seat opened? I said, Judge, I'm not aware of one. I've talked to the presiding judge, and I know that it looks like that's the only person who's retiring in that window or leaving in the window. It was a judge who got sent to the federal court. And Judge Joe said, well, what if my seat opened?
Oh.
And I said, what? He said, Pete, tomorrow is the day we need to file. And I'm going to go in and tell them I'm not filing. I'm going to retire, and I want you to run for my seat. And I will back you. I will endorse you. I'll be your #1 campaigner. And of course, I could not say no to that. I
And
could
this
not.
is on the deadline day, by the way.
Well, this was the day that the judges could first file.
Okay.
And so on that same day, on that night, I had a discussion with Ann, my wife, and I said, "Are you ready to try this again?" Because as you know, I did run before. Again, up until that time, wasn't even on my radar. And she, God bless her, she's 100% behind me. She said, let's do it. And, there's really two reasons I said yes. First of it is I think the world of Judge Brannigan. He is highly respected in the court, has had an incredible career. Side note, he's an ex-Army guy. I'm a Navy guy. Navy guys will help the Army out whenever they need it. So, but the real reason is I know this, and maybe we'll talk about this later. I won't belabor it, but these courts are in crisis, largely because of the pandemic. And I'll give you, one example. There are cases backed up that are really, really mind-numbing and scary to someone like me in the justice system, in that I think it's on the brink of almost collapse. Maybe that's a little extreme for me to say, but let me give you one example. There are, as last I knew, and this is very recent information, roughly 900 to 1,000 felony jury trials. Never mind felony criminal jury trials. Never mind civil cases. Never mind misdemeanor cases. 900 to 1,000 felony jury trials pending right now.
Wow.
Today. The public defender, who, side note, he's endorsed me as well. So I have both, I've tried to cover the bases in my outreach, but I've talked with him. Randy Mize is his name. He is the public defender for the county of San Diego. And he told me that, they're estimating in the new fiscal year coming up in June to get out about 150 so trials of those done. So do the numbers. How are we going to clear these cases? I don't have those solutions. If I did, I'd be in a different position. What I do have is an ability to come in, get to work in any one of the court positions that they may need me tomorrow. And I, with that understanding, I could not say no. It would be a lot easier to simply stay with chief trial counsel. And if this doesn't work out, that's where I'll be. Make some decent money.
Yeah.
But, that's not what I'm about. I'm not looking for a retirement. I'm well past the point that it'll really count for me. I'm not looking for a promotion. I just see a need in the justice system overall that I think I can help, and I couldn't say no.
So is the backlog because of the pandemic, because they couldn't have the trials, or they were doing them remotely and it just slowed down the process?
Yeah, it's mostly the first, which is they couldn't have them for a very long time. The courts went essentially dark, starting with the advent of the COVID of the pandemic. They stayed dark. I wasn't there, so I wasn't administering. I don't know what was happening in the administration of the courts. I followed it in the official. The presiding judge would have, through the county bar, would have periodic meetings to just kind of update everyone where they're at. Do I think we could have done some more? I'll give you an example. I've talked at some length to the chief judge of the federal court across the street, which is Judge Dana Sabraw, happens to be the husband of the district attorney, Summer Steffen. Quite the power couple.
Yeah, really.
But Judge Sabraw told me at an event that I was at in December, so I wasn't looking at running at all. I asked him about, how the federal court was doing. Now, recognize the Southern District here that he oversees, in the Southern District of California, the federal district court, is one of the most impacted courts in the country for a lot of reasons: the border, immigration, drugs, and so forth. But and all of the other things that the U.S. attorney or that the federal court handles. So it's not like it's a sleepy court. They are jammed. But he told me he brought in Wilma Wooten, who was the public health director, and said, look, we need to open these courts. And this was a few months down the road. So what do we need to do is what he asked her. And they worked on a plan and set up these federal courts to start trying cases again. And as of December, he was telling me that they essentially have no backlog. So I don't know what more we could have done. I wasn't there, but I do know that we've got a crisis situation that was largely, I mean, of course, it was driven by the pandemic when they couldn't have it. The attempt to do Zoom trials, the Zoom, I think, and I was asked this in, I think, the Union Tribune interview, or at least the questions they asked, whether I thought that Zoom, or MS Teams is what they use, should stick around. I think it absolutely should. It represents efficiency for the courts, especially in the more routine matters. There's a lot of things that can be done and done quickly, which is essential. It's essential we be even more efficient now. But trials, just don't work very well in the Zoom online mode. I mean, people have done them in other parts of the country. I think we've done some here. But they just pose so many more issues, and they're just and you get beyond just the logistical issues of we talk about the need for the interplay in a trial of the lawyers with the witnesses and how the juries perceive that. And when you take it out of the courtroom and put it on a screen that people are only looking at, it just loses something. It loses that confrontation that we always talk about, that ability for both the lawyers, but certainly the jurors, to really assess the demeanor of witnesses as they testify, which is critical.
I mean, one could say it's not really a fair trial if it's not in person, because the prosecution and the defense can't make their case as effectively, both sides. Right?
I would think not.
Yeah.
I won't say that those that have done trials through, the internet, through Zoom or MS Teams or whatever, were they unfair? I don't think so. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I just know it loses something.
Yeah.
And then when you take jurors and take them out of the courtroom and put them on computer screens, what at home? And I mean, there's multiple stories of, a juror's phone is ringing or the dog is barking. I mean, these things don't happen in the courtroom. And I think we have found, I can't speak for everyone, I think we have found that jury trials just don't work online. They have to be in person.
Yeah.
So,
well, what about if there are, let's say, 1,000 trials in backlog? Well, where are those 1,000 accused criminals? Are they being held in jail for longer than they really should be because of the backlog? Or maybe some are out on bail, right?
Yeah, well, some are out on bail. Most are being probably held. Well, I don't know the answer to that. I'm guessing a big bulk of them are in jail because they're not, low-level crimes. I say that most of the low-level ones have been released on zero bail. We can talk about that and how that has come to pass, or been released with various restrictions, and they're out in the community pending their cases. The ones that we're most worried about are those who are sitting in custody, and these are significant and serious crimes. That's why they're in custody. And those of that 900 number, I don't know, but I'm guessing quite a large amount of those are very serious cases. And those people are sitting in jail. Now, depending on which side you may go, my God, that's a travesty because these people are not convicted of anything.
Right.
And others would say, well, they're all criminals. I'm like, well, no, they're not until we prove that.
Right.
And, if the criminal justice system stands for anything, it is that everyone has an entitlement to be heard by a jury of their peers and to present their case and to hear the evidence against them and then get it played out. That's what a trial is. The delay in all of that is, by any definition, delaying individuals' rights. There's just no way around,
because we all have a right to a speedy trial, as they say.
Absolutely. And the only reason that isn't happening is we have these emergency orders handed down by the California Supreme Court that apply to all the trial courts throughout the state, and which were necessary for the pandemic. That's the only way we could continue to push these cases off. But those are about to end, those emergency orders. Some would think, why didn't they end already? that's up for the Chief Justice and the governor and others to figure out, to answer. But the short answer to all of that is they're about to end. And if we can't try 900 cases, as we said, we're basically set up to try to do 150 in the coming year. What's going to happen?
Yeah, because that's not enough. I mean, because it's going to take you, what, 6 years to get through it all.
To get through that.
Plus, you've got some that are still flowing in.
And crime keeps happening, as we know. So we're facing, and that's when I talk about these are potentially crisis levels. And that's just the criminal courts. I'll give you one other example, family law court. And I use this because I think it's maybe strikes home to most people. You're like, criminals, I don't commit a crime. Okay, well, I hope you never do and never have to face what faces someone in a criminal courtroom. But family law, I'll give you one example. I know of a case because the firm I'm with handles family law matters. I won't tell you anything specific about the case, but it is a child custody issue, and that's contested. And there's what we call a DVTRO, a domestic violence temporary restraining order that has been asked for by one spouse, and that's being contested by the other spouse. Getting a temporary restraining order for domestic violence slapped on you is a serious thing. So the other side is contesting it. I know nothing about the facts, so whether it's righteous or not. But the court, I think it's out of South Bay, has set now a contested hearing date to hear the facts from both sides. And that date is January of 2023.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I hear things like that, and that's not the court's right. I'm sure that's what the first opening we have. So what happens in that period? This is obviously a tense situation for a family who are fighting over both their marital dissolution and their child custody, and there are serious allegations being splayed, and we're not going to get it heard for almost a year. That's a domestic violence case waiting to happen in the criminal courts. It strikes me.
For sure.
And so the need to get people into the courtroom to have their matters heard and resolved is the very foundation of our justice system. And if we can't do that, we're going to lose that very foundation. And that worries me. And it's exactly why I'm running. Again, we have a great bench here in San Diego, make no mistake about it. A lot of dedicated judges who are working their tail off. So I can't solve those problems. We have a great presiding judge and assistant presiding judge who are wrestling these issues, I'm sure. What I think I can offer is a help, because I have all that experience that can be brought to bear. And that's the simple reason why I'm running.
Good for you, because there is a problem. You want to get out there and help solve it, bring your experience to the table. Now, just on a little bit of a tangent, but can the court system increase their bandwidth by having more judges and more trials, and just to get through this backlog?
Short answer, they're sort of trying to do that. And in answer to more judges, no. The only way more judges come in is if the legislature funds new judgeships. Well, that hasn't happened. As far as I know, I don't think it's happened in my career. I mean, San Diego has the same number of judicial seats that it had when I started 30 years ago.
Well, the population has doubled, maybe tripled since then.
And it's all about funding. And the courts are notoriously underfunded. They don't have a great political arm to lobby for themselves. I'm sure, the Chief Justice up there in Sacramento does what she can. But let's face it, it doesn't get, the attention and the funding that it might need. There's a lot of issues there. I mean, should courthouse have been constructed and so forth and so on? I don't know. But the plain and simple fact is, for example, Riverside is even more impacted than we are. They have actually gotten new judgeships in the last several years. I don't remember exactly when, but I know they've actually added some. San Diego hasn't, and I don't think there's any prospects for any being added anytime soon. So what we do need is all of these seats that are available to be filled. And there have been retirements, and there are new retirements occurring every day. The governor just appointed 4 new judges to fill open seats, people who've retired and left midterm, so their seat is not up for election. So the appointments fill that seat. until the end of that term. And with those 4 appointments, I still think we have about 10 seats open.
Wow.
Waiting to be appointed. And that's up with the governor's office. That's up to them.
Right.
The difference is when someone retires, like Judge Joe Brannigan, by not filing for their new term, that seat goes up for election. And that's why this right now, there are 40, I think it's 46 judges up for re-election in this term. Only 2 of them are contested, because all of those sitting judges, the other 44, no one filed to run against them. And so they were deemed elected at the close of the filing period, and you'll never see their names on the ballot. They've been elected to a new 6-year term. The 2 open seats in the case of Judge Oda, who was elevated to the federal court, her seat, because it was not filled, given the nature of how she left, that went to election, and that's one of the seats contested. And then Judge Joe Brannigan, when he decided not to file, there was a window where his seat would go up for election if people filed. And of course, I filed the day after he called me and said, yes, sir, I'll take it on. And so we did. And so there's only 2 contested judicial seats. It's the only 2 you'll see on your ballot.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but getting back to your question, which is, that's the only way to fill our legislature approved number. And even now we have open seats. What they're doing, there's a lot of creative work going on. They've asked some of the retired judges to come back, and they can sit as, in a retired judge program. So there are ways to help that. It's not going to clear the numbers we're thinking about. It helps. And I'm sure there's a lot of really smart things going on with the administration of our court, San Diego Superior Court, the presiding judge and assistant presiding, to try to work through these. But what I know is, and what I want to be, is an asset to say, I can go wherever you need me. I'm not just a deputy DA. Okay. Side note, there's a deputy DA, a young deputy DA running against me, who is, he's done nothing but criminal prosecution, which is all good. I won't demean that, because I have that in my background. I've just added 18 more years of other stuff on top of it. I want to be the asset to say, I can go to work tomorrow in any one of those courts. You need me in juvenile court, I'm ready to go. You need me in family law, I'm ready to go. And I think that represents an asset to the court.
Because you have experience in all those categories.
In all of them. And a lot of experience. That's another side of, all of this, is that I like to see my judges with a lot of experience. You're making decisions. Judges are making decisions every single day. They're impacting people's lives. And, when I go out on the campaign trail, I spend a lot of time trying to educate, telling people how important this job is. I mean, they're making decisions. They're not in a legislative body. In other words, with a group, not a city council, all alone. You're making decisions every day, impacting numbers of lives. And I want to see someone who has the experience to be brought to bear on that. And it's both a professional experience, like I've been talking about, but also life experience. I mean, I've been a practicing lawyer for 31 years. I'm an ex-Navy pilot. Even why I bring up my background, that's all of who I am. And that's the kind of experience that can be brought to bear in dealing with people's lives and recognizing I'm impacting these lives every day. And, when I tried all those cases, mostly as a DA and in my private practice and as an AG, I'm very proud to say I almost took this for granted. I have never had a case ever overturned on appeal. Not one. And I've never had even a hint of any impropriety, any, improper conduct, etc. I take that for granted because I think that's what's expected of me. I'm not going to get there, but just trust me to say, or suffice it to say, that not every opponent of mine can say that. I'll leave it to whoever wants to research it. It's easy enough to find. When I will say, and why that matters, it's not just some holier than thou, I've never been overturned on appeal. Understand that when we try a case, There are rules that need to be followed, and prosecutors are held to follow those rules. And if you don't, there's a reason why, because we're now depriving people of their fundamental constitutional rights when we do things wrong as a prosecutor. And if you don't follow those rules, you are by definition depriving someone of those rights. And if you get it so wrong that an appellate court overturns you because of your actions and sends it back, guess what? 3 years, 4 years later, that whole case is now coming back to the courthouse to be retried again. And that means the cops are coming back to retestify 4 years later after all the cases they've done, all the money that's being spent to retry a case that shouldn't have happened. It should have been done right the first time. It is up to prosecutors to make sure it's done right. We call it perfect the record. You need to be aware of that. And quite frankly, it's up to the judge to make sure those rules are followed. When that doesn't happen, and cases get overturned on appeal, but when it doesn't happen, there's cost to it. And that's what I'm trying to make clear here. It's not just the most obvious. If you deprive someone of their fundamental constitutional rights, that should cause us all to take aback. But it's in the most base sense. It's costing people's money. It's costing the people's money.
Well, it seems like it's more than just money, because if you have to retry a case, let's say 4 years later, the facts get a little fuzzier, right?
By definition, we've always said time is the ally of the defense. Memories don't get better over time.
Right.
And the longer your case gets played out, the more difficulties you're asking for as a prosecutor.
Wow.
And think about that with all these cases that are backed up. These do witnesses die, disappear, forget?
Yeah.
So anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent, but to answer, there's not an easy solution to clearing these cases. If I had it, I'd run down there and tell them it. I don't. But I know it means at a minimum, we've got to get to work. Do we increase the amount of night courts? Do we have judges cover multiple different departments? In other words, if you're family law and you've finished the morning, don't have something in the afternoon, can you go in and pick up the load in criminal courts? I'll be careful here. I hope to have some of these folks as colleagues, but I won't want to, suggest that they should be working more than they should. But on the other hand, this is a public service job. And if they tell me I need you to cover night courts, 3 days a week, my answer as a good Navy guy is yes, sir. You got it.
Well, I mean, as a judge, how many cases could you handle in parallel at the same time? I mean, that must be challenging to switch back and forth between the trials.
I would think it's less challenging, especially if you have a basis in the particular area. So in other words, if you're familiar with juvenile law, the juvenile court and the criminal court, because there's a lot of overlap. Let's start with that, assuming you have that. Then it becomes just switching from one case to the other, which is really a skill I think a judge is going to have.
Yeah.
The civil courts alone, any one of them down there, they have an independent calendar with all their cases. I don't know the numbers, but I'm guessing that on average, they're handling 80 to 100 plus cases on their docket. And so every day when a motion's coming in, they've got to recage into a particular case and then move to the next one. I mean, it's a difficult job.
That's incredible. I mean, that's a lot to switch gears on.
It's a lot to switch gears on, and which is why, it's not only an important job, it's important we put the right people there who are ready to take that on.
Right.
And, as I said, most of these judges that I know work really hard, but we're in crisis, and that means we may have to work harder.
Amazing. Well, what I do want to do is I want to tell the audience here that if you're watching on the live stream, we're happy to take any questions or comments. We're live streaming on both Facebook and YouTube. So if you have a question for Pete, just type them in. We'll see them on the screen and we'll do our best to respond. Yeah. But I've got some questions.
Go for it.
Okay.
I'll take my best.
So, here, we live in the same community here up in North County. There seems to be a lot more property crimes in people's homes, break-ins, thefts. Just wondering what your perspective is on that. What's causing this rise? Is it pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, or what is it? And why are we having so much trouble really prosecuting some of these folks?
Yeah, it's that's a large question. I mean, the broadest sense is, why is crime up? Again, if I could answer that, I suspect I'd go be a professor at Harvard or Duke.
Right.
I'm sure it spins out from the pandemic. There's a lot of psychological stress that people have been under, and all of that. So we all know that. What has occurred, and I've got to be careful as a prospective judge. I'm subject to the same canon of ethics that any sitting judge is. So I cannot opine about a position or give any indication of how I might rule on a particular
I understand.
case. So just that as a disclaimer. But it is clear to me that we have taken some actions with regard to criminal justice in particular that I call the pendulum swing. I was there in the DA's office when we instituted 3 strikes. From a reduction of crime level alone, I don't think anyone could deny that 3 strikes was effective. Now, on the other hand, we had some anomalous, and it was maybe far too common, results that just nobody in their right mind could live with. An older gentleman who steals a bottle of liquor that costs $25, but he has serious robberies in his past, maybe many years ago. And he takes 1 bottle of liquor because it may be only a petty theft, but we call it petty with a prior. We did back then, which is if you have a theft offense before and you commit another theft, it's elevated to a felony. So now he has a felony with 2 serious felony priors. He's now looking at 25 years to life in prison. And that to me seems extreme. I mean, people need to be held accountable. But personally, I don't want to have a prison full of geriatric people that we're now paying for all their health care until they die. I mean, that just gets a little silly. So I felt there was probably a need over these years to kind of let's get smarter on crime, not just tougher. Where we've gone recently is quite far the other way, which is cops are all liars and thieves and beating people up. And the criminal justice system is a mess. And that I absolutely push back against. That's just not true. Cops are out there every day working their tails off in really dangerous situations. They're people. They make mistakes. They need to be held accountable when they make mistakes. But to talk about these notions of defunding the police or making police go away is asking for anarchy. And it's really almost silly on its face. So the more we've done that, the more we, look, the people out in the community that care to prey on people, whether it be stealing things or, perpetrating crimes against individuals, they may not have gone to law school. They may not have, know the nuances of law. They know the pulse of what's going on in the streets. And when they know that in our new, legislative enactments over the last several years that people who commit a crime by stealing from a store of less than $950, it's a misdemeanor. And the sheriff won't arrest people on a misdemeanor. Why? Because they bring them to the jail. They're going to be released on a 0 bail release immediately. So they're not going to get even put into the jail. So they cite them. And as far as these people care, great. Another piece of paper, throw it aside, and I'm going to go commit a crime again tomorrow. So there's no, we need both the carrot and the stick always. The carrot is let's help people who need problems, whether it be mental health, drug abuse, people suffering from homelessness and commit crimes just to eat. I mean, there's a lot of things we need to do. But we also have to hold people accountable for committing crimes against the community.
Right.
And when we don't, then we get what we ask for. And I think that's what we have started to see is people feel, certain people feel they have a carte blanche to do whatever, that cops aren't responding. I can't speak to the police officers or deputy sheriffs out there, but I got to believe that you're called to a call, a domestic violence call or a theft call. You're going to want backup before you even show up, because the first thing you know, you show up, someone's got a handheld phone taking your picture on video, and who knows where this could go. I think we've done a disservice by making the cops a little afraid of what they're going to face out in the streets, instead of knowing we have their back, that we have their back as long as they're policing in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I listened to a certain, I'm not going to give up his name because he was, not, I don't think official, but he's an assistant chief of a very big, one of the largest police department in town. So, and as he said, look, no one is going to watch that police officer kneel on a guy's neck for as long as he did and think that's okay. No decent police officer is ever going to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, when I see that, I wanted to be able to go there and pull him off. And that, I think, is what we have to understand. No one's accepting that. But the flip side of all the cops are bad and liars and trying to kill us is asking for anarchy. And the people who will suffer the most are the communities of color, where, crime will run rampant. And that's the ultimate inequity in my mind, is if all communities, including the communities of color and what we might call disadvantaged communities, can't have the safety of the community in the face of police enforcement, then we've lost everything as a society. So I'm rambling on. I don't mean to, but the answer as to why has crime gone up, I think, is shortly because of things we've started taking for granted, which is that the cops are there to be part of the community and to be our safety. And when we vilify them, then who are we going to turn to? I mean, when you have a crime, or if someone commits a crime, or, I look at the Seattle mayor who was big behind that,
mm-hmm.
until they marched on her house and then she called the police. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can be done, I think, better in policing. I'm not a policing expert by any stretch. I've just watched it as a prosecutor. But crime is definitely going, and it's up across the board. Murder rates are up. Gun discharges and gun offenses are up, and we all know thefts are up. I mean,
Well, are they up because the pandemic year everything was near zero, or are they up compared to pre-pandemic?
No, they're up over pre-pandemic.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's and some. I don't want to have someone say, well, technically on, this crime,
Right, yeah.
I'm sure as a general rule, crime is up, not compared to the near zero or whatever was happening in the pandemic. We're talking pre-pandemic.
I understand.
Numbers are up. I think for one example, murders. We haven't seen this level of murders in San Diego since, I think, the 80s.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I wasn't paying much attention to that stat.
You know what? And for certain communities, we have the luxury to not be exposed to that so much. Okay, good. But, I worry about the inner city communities. They should be able to walk out of their house and not feel like they're going to get shot. And we need police on the streets. Community-oriented policing is a term that's used and is not as widely accepted as we might think, because it just makes infinite sense. Get cops who are familiar with the neighborhood, that get to know people, so that when you have a problem, you call Officer Smith and they're there. They are part of a partnership with the community, and I know they want to be. And we need to make sure that happens. And when it does, I think we see crime go down. Because nobody wants to be victimized. No one wants their property stolen. I don't care how small it is. I mean, simple things that we go, oh, come on, my car got broken into and they stole I'll date myself, my CDs or whatever. But for the person who had that happen, it's fairly traumatic.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, what do you mean someone came in my driveway and helped themselves into my car? I'm reading that even around this neighborhood.
Right.
the fact that someone literally climbed under my car and cut the catalytic converter off, and oh my God, what world are we living in?
Mhm.
And I think it's a whole combination of things, but part of it that can be corrected is to stop vilifying the very people who we put in place to protect us against crime, and that's law enforcement.
Right. Well, it's interesting because there are some people that have almost a religious reverence of police officers.
Yes,
And then that they could do no wrong.
exactly.
And then there are others that think the complete opposite.
Exactly.
But I think to your point in the Union Tribune interview article that I read, he said the pendulum is swinging both ways, but we just need to be smart about how we go about these problems.
Right.
And I agree with you. I think a lot of it is trust building with police and having them as an integral part of the community.
Right. Right. And, it's, again, I want to be careful going outside my lane here, but I think a large part of it is training. Look, police are people.
Mhm.
And I've represented cops in individually. When I had my private practice, I was, representing deputy sheriffs and deputy district attorney investigators when they got in trouble. And they're people. They make mistakes. Sometimes there are some people who shouldn't be wearing a uniform. They need to be identified and removed from the force. And I don't think there's a chief of police out there that wouldn't agree 100% with me. Of course we want them out. We don't need that. They actually create a bad view of the rest of the department. So they need to do whatever they need to do to try to identify those, and they are rare, but the rogue cop or the bad cop, wherever they are, the person who takes some perverse pleasure of lording over others with their authority, and I'm the police officer, and likes to kick in doors and care not for the citizens that are out there. I mean, people like that need to be ousted, and I leave that to the law enforcement agencies to figure out how best to do that. We talked about this. I go all the way back. It's no different. I flew, as you know, for the Navy. One of my tours, I flew for the SEAL teams, and I worked with the SEALs quite a bit. And there was discussion that, everyone thinks, a SEAL is this trained killer and commando man and, flies out of trees and just executes people. And that couldn't be further from the truth. They don't want people like that. They want people who are circumspect, that have all the skills and then are circumspect about how they use them. And it's no surprise that most of the enlisted SEALs are all college graduates. I mean, they are a very bright group. And I think you can apply that to the police department. Most of them are really sharp. You're going to find the rogue. They need to be identified and said, thank you, but go find someplace else. Beyond that, I'm sure there's a level of training. There are things, these are cops when they come in are pretty young generally. And we need to increase training perhaps in many areas. Again, I leave that to law enforcement. So there are things that can be done to make police better. But to go to the other side and literally do throw them out, the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And what are you left with? I mean, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, the notion of, I like the idea of having some kind of, and we have them now, these PERT teams, response teams that, respond to, mental health crisis issues. But you show me a mental health psychologist or psychiatrist that is fine with going out to the street to respond to someone who's literally decompressing and having an episode all by themselves without police support. And they're like, I'm not crazy. I'm not doing that.
Mhm.
And, that is one of the things I sort of heard. I'm fine with, let's get a team. The police is there for safety, and let's the mental health professionals try to, reduce the situation down and see what we can do to this person so that they don't become a statistic and end up in the jail. Because I can assure you of this, I can't speak for him, but her now, the acting sheriff, the last thing they want are people who are really mental health issues in the jail. And you'd be amazed how much that's what our largest mental health treatment facility is right now, is the San Diego County Sheriff's Jail.
That's not right.
And it's not where,
Yeah.
it's not good for anyone. It's not helping them. It's a mess. And so we do need to address, and that's when I talk about being smart on crime. Let's understand what the issues are and start to attack them appropriately. Again, these are much broader issues than me public policy stuff, but we need better mental health treatment facilities. We need better vehicles to treat mental health, because it's a huge part of our crime. Drugs. I mean, I remember a statistic, I'm guessing it's probably not far off, that of all the people in jail, 90% of them have a drug issue. And so if we can address people's drug issues and keep them out of the jail, my gosh, I mean, we're going to make a lot of inroads. So that's where we need to get, and we need to have that same smart approach to law enforcement. It is necessary, and no surprise, the very people who were talking about defund the police and all seem to be all of a sudden up to and including our president is, no, we're not defunding the police, because we see what happens when we do that.
Well, some have said they were wanted to defund, and they've done a 180.
They've done a 180 because they know, and as a big supporter of mine, former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of California, Bob Brewer, as he said to me, Pete, what will turn things around from this, and what is now, I believe, already having, is crime. People, we can all argue about things. Most people will tend to agree, I don't like crime, and I don't want it to occur, and I don't want to be victimized. And the more it's starting to happen and destroy our streets, I mean, go to downtown San Diego. It's not the same town anymore. And we need to do things so that we can reduce the crime level, because if people can't be safe, then I don't know if anything else matters in our communities. I mean, maybe getting water and sewage are about the only things that come close. After that, it's about safety, whether it be police or fire. If we can't have safety, we can't live in a community. So that's where we need to be smart. I'm just thinking that there's a lot going on here, because we just talked about the backlog in the court cases.
Yes. Now we're talking about the increase of crime.
Yes.
So it's almost like whack-a-mole. So like, if you are able to deploy more police to fight crime and fight it the right way, you're going to create more court cases, which is going to make the backlog even worse.
Right. Well, and that's assuming, and I would hope, maybe I'm a idealist, but I would hope that just having more police does not mean more cases in court. Maybe having more police means less crime.
Okay, that's a good call.
Less cases in court. And when they do occur, we need to have the right solutions. For all of these people, we can get into the what people like call the zero bail status, which is rules that were passed and changing the bail schedule. It's not totally accurate, zero bail, but we have largely gone to zero bail on misdemeanors and low-level felonies, meaning people never go to jail. But can we do things to say we're still going to hold you accountable?
Of course.
So you may not go to jail, but I can put you on a device that's going to track you to make sure you come back. And if you don't, then you are going to go to jail. We need to look at ways, and what we don't realize when we say, zero bail, the answer is the law that was passed, and it's based on a court case, said that, people can't be held in jail simply because they can't afford bail. That's unconstitutional and unfair. It's a deprivation of their rights. And I agree with that as so far as it goes. But what are we really saying is, so what does it mean you can't afford it? Is if you put on someone who's committing a theft, of low level, stealing that bottle of liquor, and they got a $5,000 bail, well, that's not very much. Well, for some of these people, it might be 5 million. It might as well be 5 million. They can't afford it. And do we really need that person in jail? That's what a judge can decide, because the judge still has discretion. We don't hear this much. A judge has to find that I will not put you in jail, or the only way I can put you in jail is if it is the least restrictive way to ensure two things. One, that you will come back, and two, that the community will remain safe, or you will not victimize the community. And if I find that neither of those can be met by anything short of, by anything but jail, then you're going to jail and you're going to stay there on a bail. But let's face it, most of these people, there are less restrictive ways. We can require them to report in or to be on an electronic device in the new technology where we know where they are. So are we really worried? Again, we're not talking about people who are perpetrating crimes against children, child molesters and rapists and so forth. Those people need to be taken out of the community, end of story, and held out of there until their case is resolved. And if convicted, then they'll answer for it. But for the people that aren't really a threat to the community, then let's find ways to keep them out of a jail, because it's not the sheriff's job to just house all these people for us.
I mean, I remember you brought up this point the last time you were here, is that this is where a judge can use judgment,
Yes.
And make the appropriate call rather than having their hands tied by some mandate from up above.
Yeah. Which is, I think I got pushback on this once. I actually would argue for giving more discretion to judges. The prime example may be in the federal courts, which used to have the federal sentencing guidelines. They were actually federal sentencing directives. And there's countless numbers of cases, you've read them, where a federal judge has said, look, I mean, I would not put you in prison, federal correctional facility for as much time, but my hands are tied. I must follow these directives that have come down. They've loosened that up, and that's why they're now guidelines. But that gives a judge discretion based on all kinds of factors to make the right call. And I argue that it is us, if I'm ever so fortunate to be there, a judge who should be held accountable. You make the call. And if you're messing it up, you're going to answer to the people at the next election. Or if they think strongly, then recall you. And I am all for that. Bring it on. I mean, I should be held accountable for my decisions. But in the same breath, give me the discretion to assess a case, to understand each individual and what is really going to solve the problem here. And don't tell me I have no choice but to release this person on one hand, or no choice but to confine them when there is a better solution. And, let's not only allow our judges the discretion to do that, but then hold them accountable for that. But, another question asked in the UT about, cameras in the courtroom. I speak that very broadly. I expect as a general rule, they should absolutely be allowed always. I mean, there are reasons, certain courts, juvenile court, it's a private setting and it is not a public record. So no cameras are ever going to be in there. And then situations with a rape victim. No, I'm not, I would not.
Those are exceptions.
Exceptions.
The rule should be.
The rule is this is an open courtroom.
Yes.
Everyone in the community. I've had people ask me all the time, God, I'd like to go see. I said, go walk in any courtroom. They're open. And if the bailiff asked you, what's your business here? Your answer can be as simple as I'm just watching. And they'll say, oh, okay. Too many people are intimidated, but it's our courts. Pet peeve of mine. It drives me nuts every time. And you can yell at me if I ever say it, if I'm so fortunate to make it to the bench, is I hope I never say what I've heard too many times. In my courtroom. It is not my courtroom. It is not any judge's courtroom. It is the people's courtroom. The people own this courtroom. I'm just, as a judge, I would just be doing one of the jobs in there, an important one by any measure, but one of the jobs. And when we remember, it is, all of this is owned by the people. Three, preamble of the Constitution, it is we the people.
Right.
And if we don't keep that first and foremost and at the forefront on everything we do, we're losing it. And so again, I'm probably
this is good.
Flipping off.
Let's go to the you brought up the Constitution. I'm going to switch gears a bit.
Yeah.
I remember you told me last time that you spend a certain portion of your time going out and talking to high school kids and teaching them about the are you still doing that?
I haven't during COVID because in the last recent one, they wanted to still do it on Zoom. And then they asked if we could produce a video, and I had some other things going on, just a short video, and I would have loved to do it. But I had some conflicts. I was still with the AG's office, Attorney General's office, and I was doing some stuff. So I wasn't able to spend the time to do that at the time. But if I'm really honest, for me, the joy is in that classroom, and they haven't done it for the last several years. And so I haven't done it in the last couple of years. Even they do it every September around Constitution Day, the signing of the Constitution. excuse me. And and I think it's a wonderful program. I love partaking in it because it gets you out of the law school mode and down to the kids that I think really matter. I have a story always because I'm an Irishman. I'm supposed to have stories, and they're true. So I'll tell you one. This probably sums up exactly why I do this. I've been to Poway High School. I've been to Scripps Ranch High School. I've been to CCA, Canyon Crest Academy, and I've done those. But I try to go more. I've been to Lincoln High School, Morse High School, Abraxas Continuation School. That's where I find that that's where I really feel like I'm touching people, because sometimes they're feeling we're not really part of this. And so I was at Abraxas. And I gave my talk and took questions. And at the end, and they were aware of my bio. I mean, you've heard it. At the end, this young woman came up to me and said, I would really like to go to law school. And she's at Abraxas. So for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, it's a continuation school. For whatever reason, the regular high school has not worked out for the kids there. Some have gotten kicked out of the school. Some it just doesn't flow for them. Maybe they've got family issues, et cetera, et cetera. But it is, an alternative high school. And, they're not worried about things like how many AP courses am I taking. I mean, they're looking to get through, high school and earn their high school diploma. So this young gal comes up to me and said she would really like to, really liked what we were talking about and would love to study this more and go to law school. And I said, so you should. She goes, my parents came over on a visa. She was Latina, and to pick fruit. I was raised here. They have, I am now a citizen and all, but I mean, we come from a very poor background. No one's ever, she was saying my father never even finished 8th grade, much less high school. And so I don't know. I said, you heard my background, but let me tell you something maybe you don't know, which is, you heard that I went to an elite undergrad and elite. Okay, I couldn't have afforded that, but for the fact that the Navy put me through that. I mean, my grandfather, I've told you, came over on a boat as well. He slept on the floor of a room. He faced those signs that said Irish need not apply. And I said, I know you look and see a middle-aged white dude who went to elite schools, and the answer is, but it's all about following your dream and working hard. And if you do that, I promise you, you will get to where you want to be. And she said, and I'll never forget, she said, I think I'll go to law school. I said, and so you shall. And I hope she did. I don't know. But talking about these things, I always tell these kids, it's about those 3 words, we the people. It is our system. It is the only reason this country exists, the strength of the people. And so having that opportunity to tell high school kids, especially ones who feel like they're a little disenfranchised, that no, you're not. I know you will face obstacles. I guarantee you that. And some of them will be enormous, but you've just got to keep going. And if you do, that's what this country represents, opportunity. And sometimes people say, well, opportunity for some. I don't buy that. We need to remove the obstacles where they exist.
Sure.
But this country, if it stands for anything, it stands for opportunity. And, I'm a old softy when it comes to that. I believe in it strongly, and I get to talk about this kind of stuff to high school kids, and it's huge.
That's awesome.
It is. It's fun.
It'll be great to be able to talk to high school kids, in your future, as an elected judge, because you'll have a whole new perspective potentially.
If I am so fortunate and honored by the people of this county to get there, I promise you I will continue to do that.
Well, speaking of opportunities, we have a lot of opportunities to answer questions that have been coming in here. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to pick a few here. And we'll read them together.
Sure.
This is from Yuri Bolin. He says, hello, Your Honor.
No, sir. Sorry, Yuri. I appreciate that. Not yet. And I will not accept that until the people decide. But thank you for that.
He goes, where I work in Poway in the good old days, shoplifters tried to be sneaky. Now they are arrogant and steal right in front of you and say, you can't touch me. What can be done at the local level?
Well, what can be done at the local, the answer is you're right. And I hope we kind of touched on that, Erie, earlier on as to why this may be occurring. I don't have the absolute answers, but people are arrogant and see because they feel they can get away with it now. They know that the police, half the time they won't, be quick to respond because of all the issues that we've set in place. And when they do, they'll cite them with a piece of paper and say, come to court in a month, but you're not getting arrested. And when you're facing, the people who care to commit those thefts know that, and trust me, they do. That's why they say you can't touch me, because they know they can get away with it and they can blow off that case, and eventually it'll go out to warrant, and who knows when it'll ever get addressed. But what can we do at the local level with those things? I mean, it has to be, look, as a judge, if I were so fortunate to be there, I don't get to make the laws. I only get to enforce them and to interpret them and apply them, not enforce. That was a misspeak of mine. That's law enforcement. And that's important to know, that a judge has only one role, but it's an important one, which is to apply the law as it stands. I may disagree with a law, but I have no choice but to follow it. The only recourse I have is if I find that it runs counter to the ultimate law we have, namely the Constitution. But as long as it meets constitutional, scrutiny, if you will, I have no choice but to follow the law. And so judges aren't going to change that. Who can change it are legislators. And it starts with, your local city council to do things to help support store owners and so forth, and then to reach out through their venues to their elected, to the people above them, namely state assembly, state senate, and on the way up, to pass laws that make it more difficult. That's the stick part of this. We should be out there trying to help people that need help, but people who are going to commit crimes have to also be held accountable. Heck, we teach that to our kids. Why would that be any different than anyone else in the community? Which is, look, you make a mistake, you're going to be held to answer for it, period. And we have to have laws that actually say that. Unfortunately, we've swung that a bit too far the other way, that people feel they can and do get away with it. And so they feel they can run around with carte blanche to do what they want. Hope that helps.
We got a couple more questions if you like.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one's from Pete Neal. He says, do you feel that there is more focus on our legal system now compared to 10 years ago?
That's an interesting question, Peter. I think there is, but I think it's maybe beyond just our legal system. I think people are paying a little more attention now. I think people are seeing that if we just let things go, a la Seattle or Portland, we see what happens. And none of us want to live in anarchy. And so I think the citizenry is paying a little bit more attention. Part of it is what I mentioned to John here a minute ago is, when crime starts to increase to a level that we're all feeling it, we start to care a whole lot more. When it's working fine, we just, I don't even know what's going on down there in the criminal justice system. And maybe that's good. That's where citizens should be, is I don't need to worry about that. But when the crime literally reaches up their driveway and steals their catalytic converter, now we start to care. And I think there is a lot more attention. I'm out there in the campaign trail for me, but I run across all kinds of candidates, both for Congress and state assembly, state senate. And this is a common refrain I'm hearing is people are a lot more engaged now. And I think that's a very good thing. Democracy is not a, just let it happen kind of system. It requires engagement of the people. We govern ourselves, and so we have to do so. So to answer your question, from 10 years ago, which is 2011, wow, that puts us back to, in the middle of the Middle East wars of Afghanistan and so forth, but maybe 30 years ago, I go back to when I first came into the system 30 odd years ago. And I think we had a similar time of, laissez-faire mode of letting the justice system do as it will. And we were paying the price for it. And so people got engaged and we passed some laws that had impact. Again, as I said before, we maybe went too far, and that's okay. So let's course correct a little bit, find corrections here and there, not just swing all the way back and allow anarchy to rule again. And why we keep going from one side to the other without stopping somewhere in the middle is a little mind-boggling to me. But to answer your question, I do think there's more focus on it, and I think that's a very good thing indeed. People need to care about our justice system. It is the thing that keeps us there. It is the check and balance on the other two forms of government. And so we need to be engaged.
Okay. So I have another question for you. And it's, we just had hearings for Supreme Court Justice nominee Judge Jackson.
Yes.
And I guess she's going to be formally appointed in a few months, perhaps, right?
Yeah, she will be appointed as soon as the current justice steps down from retirement.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So, she's in the on deck circle.
Yes,
as it were.
she's the justice select.
Okay.
Yes.
So I remember one of the things that I thought was really interesting about her is that she was a public defender.
Yes.
And I know your background. You've tried cases. You've been on the prosecution side, but you've also done defense.
Yes.
As a private practitioner, I guess is the right word. So tell me a little bit more about what it's like to experience both sides of a trial and how the circumstances are different and what kind of insight that could give you as a judge.
Okay. I guess let me start with this. When I came out of the district attorney's office, 12 years, 100 trials, and 2 years before that in civil litigation, I, cockily felt I was pretty good. I thought I was a pretty decent trial lawyer, and it's like anything else, experience. Then I opened my own practice and I represented people in all kinds of areas, not the least of which was criminal defense cases, mostly large white-collar fraud type cases is where I focused a bit. And after those 8 years, I can comfortably say I was a far better lawyer and a far better trial lawyer than I was before I opened my own practice. And it was because doing something, quite frankly, the military tends to do in their JAG Corps, is they usually, and I can't speak definitively to this, but they will move their lawyers from the prosecution side to the defense side. And by doing so, I mean, look, you get better when you've handled cases from both sides of the aisle or from the different tables, as we call it in the courtroom, because you have insights to both sides that makes you far better. It's like anything else in life. The more we experience things, the better we're going to be at that. And there was a old time prosecutor when I was still a DA who used to say the most dangerous lawyer in the courthouse is the defense lawyer who's a former prosecutor. And now that was a little self-serving because he's like, oh my God, all those defense lawyers are, scumballs, which I always took exception to. But he had a point, which is, once you've been a prosecutor for a long period of time, you kind of know how cases are prosecuted. And as a defense lawyer, you know how to attack those cases better. And so it definitely made me a better trial lawyer, a better lawyer overall. And a better lawyer overall, because it's one thing to stand up and make no mistake about it. I had no better honor than to stand up in front of a jury or a judge and say, Your Honor, Pete Murray, representing the people of the state of California. Whether I was a DA or a deputy AG, I said the same thing because it was true. That was my client, the people of the state of California. And we the people.
Yeah.
As a defense lawyer, I picked up on which I heard a public defender say once, and I thought that was a very good line, which is she got up in one of our trials after I had said, I'm Pete Murray representing the people of the state of California, in all that smugness that may sound, and I hope I wasn't, but But she got up and she said, I'm, Jane Smith, whatever, and I represent the defendant here. I represent the people of the state of California as well. Also, I just do it one person at a time. And I thought, that's a good line. I like that. But until you've stood with someone who looks at you like, literally their knight in shining armor, you are the person between them and the apparatus of the state. And that is a really eye-opening position to be in. And I've had even I remember having a cop who was charged with a crime up in Riverside County. And he said to me once, he said, I never knew what it was like on this side. I said, no, you didn't. It is different. And you begin to appreciate what the apparatus of the state being brought to bear against you as a defendant, how significant it is. So I think it was incredibly important for me. It made me better. And I absolutely think it makes me a far better judicial candidate than I say would be if I was only a prosecutor my whole career, because I see both sides and I know what it's like to represent an individual person. And I know the compassion and the insight it takes to deal with those people. And that doesn't mean you get a pass. You're going to be held accountable. I don't think anyone who knows me knows, is going to call me soft on crime anytime soon. But I'm going to try to understand what's really underlying here. I mean, if someone is a vet who's suffering PTSD, who commits a crime or a minor assault, my God, can we put them in the Veterans Court, which is closely controlled, and get them through a program that actually addresses the root cause of their problems and take them completely out of the justice system eventually and make them move on to a productive citizen life? Boy, if that's not the goal of what we should be doing, I don't know what is. So that's what I think I bring to bear when I look at justice, the new justice. I don't know all of her background. I know, reading people that I respect, that there could be little doubt of her qualifications. And certainly being a federal public defender, she has tried a lot of cases and seen a lot of different situations. And so I'm sure that I would like to think she'd agree with me that has made her capable, amongst everything else she's done, to be a competent Supreme Court justice. I'll go off on a limb here because I know people have some very emotional responses to this. To me, the worst thing that happened is when we start to get out there with this identity politics and start to describe what we need to have. By any measure, having a court that is diverse and representative of the community is not only good, it's essential. But we can't lose sight of putting people in a place simply because of their identity as opposed to their qualifications. I don't think Martin Luther King Jr. would agree with that. He wanted a time when we would no longer measure a person by the color of their skin, but rather the strength of their character. And if we can get back to doing that, and when we look at people like Supreme Court justices and focus, I'm not appointing her, if I were Joe Biden, because of the fact she happens to be female or she happens to be black. I'm appointing her because she's the most qualified in my mind. And leave it at that and let it go, because I think she could withstand whatever scrutiny they want to throw at her. And I'm sure anyone, there's all kinds of things we could attack that public policy wise, we don't like what she's written or suggested. Fine. But when we reach the point of, can you really say she's not qualified? No. Well, then guess what? We're really done. And this is should not be a political decision, because when we start doing that, we will destroy the Supreme Court. And if we destroy the Supreme Court, we will destroy the justice system. So maybe I went beyond that question, but I kind of feel strongly, because I don't like when we politicize the courts. And it is a level of independence, and independence of the judiciary is something we talk about all the time, which is what I, quite frankly, humbly think I bring.
Well, let's talk about independence, because
Yes.
in the Union Tribune article, you made a big point of absolute independence.
Right.
Now, what does that mean in the context of being a candidate for judge?
You're right. I mean, to me, and when maybe I shouldn't use the word absolute, because that means I don't care about, here's who I answer to as a judge: the people of the county that elected me, period. And when I talk about independence, I'm talking about any particular special interest group. So whether that be, and I'll try to cover the bases, that maybe that's a police union on one side, or the Black Lives Matter movement on the other side, or Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or the Deputy District Attorneys Association. I mean, all of these are organizations that have interest, all fine. But a judge has got to be beyond that. And here's a concern I have, is that when judges look over their shoulders, because remember, every judge is running for re-election every 6 years. And something people don't know is that a judge who's, let's say they're put on the bench at 45 years old or something like, well, you cannot retire till you're 65 and have 20 years of experience or 20-year tenure on the bench. You get zero retirement prior to that. And so if you're 54 years old and been on the bench for 14 years or 12 years or something like that, you can't retire. You can't lose this job as a judge. So when you're hearing of that particularly press-worthy case that may be dividing the community, are you going to be looking over your shoulder to see what does the DA think about this, or what does the deputy district attorneys think about this, or what does the Mothers Against Drunk Driving think about this? I mean, if you're doing that, you've lost your independence. You're now concerned about what they're thinking because that you're wondering about your next election. And that worries me, because without an absolute independence of the judiciary, then we're just a political arm, and we're responding to whoever we think is going to bankroll our next election, kind of thing. Or bankroll an opponent to run against you, which is their biggest fear. I will tell you that in San Diego, we rarely have, we did 2 terms ago, have someone run against a sitting judge, and he had a lot of problems, and you may recall that. But beyond that, I think one other judge has even ever lost years and years and years ago. And if I have that right, it was because he'd been convicted of domestic violence. I mean, so people tend not to run against sitting judges here in San Diego, and they don't win, even if they do in the few cases where it happens. Nonetheless, there's not a judge that doesn't worry about that next term coming up. And oh my God, if someone runs against me, all they have to do is file, cost them $2,000. But if they do, you're now in a campaign. Now, you may have a lot of support. You still got to do what I'm doing right now. And I can assure you, most of the judges don't want to do this, to spend a campaign, to spend the money, the time, the effort to try to hold on to your job. But that may occur. And everyone whose term is expiring faces that potential. So it would not surprise me that they're going, the potential is for them to worry about the powers that be might think about it. Do you upset the business community that they're going to run someone against you? The answer is, if you can't go, look, I'm following the law and applying it to the facts of this case, and wherever the chips lay, they lay. That's the decision I'm going to make. And if you can't do that, then you're compromised. By definition, you're compromised. And that's, I'm sure every judge sitting out there would say that's what I do. But we also have to recognize there are some harsh realities here. Whereas if you lose in an election, you're out of a job. Now, what are you going to do? Go call a law firm and go, hey, remember me? I'm a judge. I haven't practiced law in years, but on and on and on. This is part of my problem with, putting people who are so young on the bench. Not only do I think you need a little life experience to be a judge, sitting up there making decisions about other people's lives. And with all due respect to, I don't know who's out there, but the 40-year-olds, the 41-year-olds, I mean, good Lord, raise some kids or something. I mean, grow up a little bit, kind of thing. But we're putting people that age on the bench all the time. The governor is. They are going to worry over that term, over whether they ever get run against. What I bring to bear is quite frankly, I don't much care about what any special interest group may think. I will always stay true to one thing. I will look at the law and apply it as best I can and will not stray from that based on the facts of the case. And if that means that I raise the ire of some group, so be it. And the beauty is, when I'm now at this stage of my career, so run against me. Take your best shot. I mean, I'm not in this for a retirement. Even if I ever retired from the bench, which I don't see happening, I'm not going to get very much money given the terms. I mean, it just isn't there. So that has nothing to do with it. You know, I don't care about that. I care about being the person that you can look at and go, he's going to make a call based on the laws. And if we don't like the laws, then go to the legislature and change them. This guy's going to base it on the law and the facts of the case. And whereas discretion applies, apply them in the most, equitable way possible, because ultimately equity does have a role in our judicial system. I'll give you one other example, and I think it's a good one. There's a current sitting judge, and you can find this, so it wouldn't be easy. Judge Frank Devaney. Judge Devaney had a case before him with the cop who was I think I have this right, a deputy sheriff. Harbor police arrested a guy, brought him to the downtown jail. They're going in the Sally Port where they drive him in, and the kid kicked open the door and jumped out of the car. I think he must have been handcuffed, and he's running down the street. And an off-duty sheriff who's coming on duty to work in the jail, of course, has his, personal revolver with him. And he ordered him to stop, and he didn't. I don't know if he chased him. The facts aren't totally important at this point, but then he shot him, and he shot him in the back. And he was charged with serious crimes. I don't recall the specifics, maybe second-degree murder, and on and on and on. Now, we could all argue, is that awful or is that appropriate? That's not the point that I'm trying to make. The point is that case came to court. He ended up pleading guilty. The district attorney, through her deputy, argued for, I think it was 8 years in state prison. Now, this guy had no other history behind him, but this was an awful shooting by really almost any definition. You don't shoot someone in the back who's not a threat. So he needed to be held accountable. But Frank Devaney looked at the entire case and ordered him. He declined to follow the DA, did not put him in prison, ordered him to go on probation for 5 years and to serve a year in county jail, which is not a pleasant thing for anybody. Trust me. But one could envision that the DA and all the other people out there, oh my God, the DA has brought a case and is arguing for 8 years. And if you've come up as nothing but a DA and you've been put on the bench with the support of DAs, how do you do when you're faced with that decision? How do you come around and ultimately order a sentence of only, probation and a year in jail? Whether it was right or whether you agree with it or not, again, is not the point. Judge Devaney used his own independence and made the ruling that I'm sure he thought was the best, the most equitable, given all the circumstances. And it's not a question of whether I agree or don't, because I don't know enough about the facts. What I like to see is he made that independent decision.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the interesting part about your background, because it is so diverse, because you've been on both tables in the courtroom, that you can apply that independence in judgment,
right? Rather
than being just one of those categories and sympathizing with that one category.
Right. And I don't mean to suggest that anybody out there, whatever their background is, necessarily does that. I just want to raise the notion of the potential for that.
Yeah.
And by removing those, we can guard against that a bit, in my mind. And they are removed largely from me because, I could tell people if I make a call that I am ready to take to my grave as the right one to make, and it means that I get defeated in 6 years, I'm fine with that. And I can afford to be fine with it because I'm old enough that it won't matter that much. I can go on to do other things or can, really retire. I don't
Yeah.
envision that ever happening. My goal here would be to serve until I can't serve anymore. This would be the last job I'd ever take in my life. And if I, that would be my goal. But the independence of the judiciary is so fundamental to our system, is why I elevate it so much in both my discussion with the UT and elsewhere. Is, I mean, my God, that's what Marbury versus Madison is all about. Is, if we turn the judiciary into a group that sways based on the political climate of the time, then we're really in trouble. And I really believe that. And that's why we have to do everything we can to enforce that notion. And we, some people would say, well, then why don't we have life tenure? Like the federal court does. I mean, the federal judges, you get on it, and that's why a lot like to go to the federal bench, because you're on for life.
That's why they're appointing them when they're in their 40s, right?
Yes, exactly. And the pushback on that might be, but now they're not really accountable to anyone, are they?
Right.
Short of some absolute malfeasance in office. But here, I mean, we could do a better job, I think, with how we elect judges. But the plain and simple fact is you're coming up for re-election in 6 years, or the end of whatever term. And that isn't a level of accountability that I think is good to maintain, but also countervailed with not being in a position where I can't afford to lose this position. And so I can't afford to upset the police union, for example. And, again, you've heard me talk about a support of law enforcement, so I'm not too worried about that. But I will say this is, any police union that would expect me to go on the bench and never allow or to thwart the prosecution of a cop for committing a crime would be grossly mistaken. That's not what's going to happen. They'll be treated like anybody else out there that commits a crime, but they'll be held accountable. And that's the independence that, I think we need. It's not just a want. It's absolutely critical.
Agreed.
So
yeah, leave the political stuff to the legislators.
Yes.
And then the judges, the judicial system should be independent, ideally unbiased.
Yes.
And just execute according to the law.
Absolutely.
And use judgment as appropriate.
Absolutely. And, I'll touch upon, people talk about, they ask, well, is the system inherently biased, inherently racist? I don't know that any system is. People are. We all have biases. I mean, let's just stop the charade of course we have biases. I mean, I can't view life through the lens of a young black man, because I'm not a young black man. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I mean, but I've had enough experiences. I grew up in a multiracial area. My brother-in-law is black. I mean, so I've been close enough to know that I can't know what that's like, but to be that person, but I've been close enough to know what some of their concerns are, and to go, you need to think about that. You need to think about those and how that may play out in a courtroom or anywhere else for that matter. And that's what I think is the most important thing we do as we talk about, all this, is to recognize we all have biases. Of course we do. We try to recognize them, suppress them where they're, coming into play in a decision we may make. And that's the effort we need to make. I mean, this presumption of, we'll all be colorblind. Well, unless we're all literally blind, that's silly.
Right.
And quite frankly, I think it takes away from the majesty of this country, the beauty of all the colors and genders and, the ethnicities. I mean, that's the strength of this country. So I revel in that. But we all have to recognize we all see life through our own perspective. But you got to start with recognizing that alone. And that's when we talk about the need for diversity. Of course there is. Because by being on the bench next to another, say, African-American or Black woman judge, I mean, we may be able to share discussions that will actually aid me in the work I do. And that's wonderful. What I don't want to do is we'll put people in a position simply because who they are and not what they bring to bear. So.
Well, let's switch gears.
All right.
Okay.
I'm game. I'll go as long as you want. I just don't want to take up all your time.
No, this is all good. No, you'll enjoy this part. Well, maybe you won't. How you doing after the Final Four? Are you
Oh
are you
man,
okay? I
no,
mean,
you had to go there. Yeah,
because I mean, Duke and UNC in the national semifinals. I mean, that must have been a really emotional game for you.
that was especially after the last game of the season, which was at Cameron Indoor Stadium, Coach K's last home game against Carolina, and they flat out put a spanking on us. I know because I watched Coach K come out. He probably would have retracted this word if he could, and he did in a sort because he kind of apologized later when he came out. And they did. We're doing a ceremony, and he kind of, I don't know if you saw that, but he then walked up to the podium, and they're like, he's like, no, I want to say something. And before they even got started, he said that was unacceptable. What you just saw in this court was unacceptable. And then I think he kind of caught himself. He said, but I still love my guys. Don't mistake what I'm saying. And we're not done yet. So we're going on to the tournament. And I'm like, okay. But in that moment, and he got some grief for this. I mean, you got these 10 guys, young men, and sitting in the stands, not only packed, but 80 former players, many of them NBA players. I was a little harsh. And I think he probably would have said, I probably should have said that.
He was caught up in the emotion of it.
Of course he was, because he's a person. I think he's the first person to say, look, I'm a human. I'm not perfect. And then but that was a tough time. And then I thought, oh, I didn't know how I felt going into that I mean, do I want to face Carolina or do I not want to face them?
Yeah.
If you're a college basketball fan, it was exactly what we should have seen. It gets no better than that. Final Four, Duke, Carolina, everything on the line. And by any measure, after I stepped away from it, it was an incredible game.
Yeah, it was
a great game.
It was
a great game. And it could have been won in the last seconds by either side. And Carolina made made shots they had. And I forget who was the Carolina player, but golly, I mean, he made those threes. You're just like, God bless you, son. You pulled it off. And so you can't be too upset with that. Sure, it was hard, but
well, that was Coach K's last game.
Very last game.
So just as a Dookie, longtime fan of the program, what do you most appreciate or respect in Mike Krzyzewski? What stands out to you?
I would not presume to know him personally. I've met him briefly. I've seen him. I've heard stories, lots of them, because I know a few of his former players, and they said you should see him behind closed doors. He can be pretty rough. He's got a side to him, and I'm sure he'd say, look, I grew up in a hard scrabble Polish Chicago neighborhood. So with that disclaimer, my takeaway is a guy who ran a program on certain principles, and he stuck with them, over the long term. I mean, it's one thing to go, I'm not going to bend to, quick fixes, trying to cheat the system or whatever the case may be. I'm going to live true to who I am, which is beautiful in its own right. But he did it for 42 years. And I don't think anyone can, believe me, I know I've read them all, the Coach K haters. But in truth, you can't really dispute what he meant to the program. There was never any controversy, any, difficulties around the program as far as recruiting or improper payments or any of that anyone's ever brought to light.
It's all first class with him.
Yeah, he's, and it comes back, maybe it's where I come from. I think he learned it as a young Army officer coming out of West Point, and it carried him throughout his life. And I think he'd say that. And I say that about myself. I mean, who I am today is because I was fortunate enough to be commissioned an officer in the United States Navy and got to serve. It's there are certain ways of, taking care of your people, and that you could see in Krzyzewski. When you had 80 people showing up, and even some, writing in, apologizing they can't show because they're literally in an NBA game that day, across the board, he touched lives. And what he did is truly what any coach is all about. It's about being a teacher, a molder of young people. And, I think he did it better than anyone else. Separate and apart from the record and the numbers. There's a reason why all of these guys, they call it the brotherhoods. I'm sure the Carolina and other people roll their eyes, but these guys, stand for each other and back each other up always. It's that's kind of my takeaway, that doesn't happen without the captain of the ship, in this case, the coach, setting that in place and enforcing it throughout. And he did, and he adapted through 42 years of an ever-changing environment. So that's my takeaway, is that he truly was a teacher and a molder of young people in the best of ways, and won a whole lot of basketball games in the process.
Yeah.
So maybe
end of an era.
Absolutely. Maybe his chosen successor who played for him and coached under him, hopefully he learned all that and will continue the tradition. Coach Shire.
He's that's a heavy baton to
very
take.
Heavy. But looking at what I'm seeing, I think you and I have talked about this. I'm not a fan in college basketball. It just is where it is. I mean, the one and dones, and now the transfer portals, and back in the day, when I went through law school, I mean, we had players there for 4 years, and you really grew with them, and those days seem to be gone, almost certainly. I don't think it's by sheer happenstance that Carolina was a little more experienced team than we were.
Yeah, they were.
And that, I think that played out for him. Baycott in particular, who's a junior now coming back. Oh my God.
Yeah, he was amazing. Yeah.
He was amazing. And he's coming back for Carolina. The fact that he, what I saw him do to us in that last home game, I mean, that was all about, junior level, 3-year experience of a guy who was not going to back down in the face of the most intimidating crowd you can imagine. God, there's a lot to be said for, it comes all the way to my campaign. It's about experience. Experience does matter. It really does. And, you can have the best freshman in the world, but I think you're asking for, that's going to be your Achilles heel too. And I think Duke has faced that since our last national championship was led by a senior, John Shire, 2015. We haven't won the national championship since. And soon after, I think it was the next year, maybe 2 years later, is when we really took on the one and dones that Krzyzewski started to say he was not going to buy, and then realized I can't fight that trend. And so he followed it. And so no surprise, next year we've got a ridiculous recruiting class coming in, apparently, plus transfers. They keep every time. I think we got the number 1 recruit in the country who just signed with Duke. So he's got the ammunition. But again, pretty young. Most of our guys have left. One of them, I think it was not AJ, the other Trevor, is coming back, as it will be a junior as the point guard. So that will help. That will help a lot. But we got a whole bunch of freshmen, and I'm just, I just think that's a lot to put on a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah, it is.
Their skills carry them until you're sitting in Cameron Indoor Stadium or the Dean Dome or Rupp Arena. I mean, man, and the pressures that come on these kids. I mean, look at it now. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. I hope I'm worried that Krzyzewski, even though he insists it had nothing to do with it, I worry that he's really leaving because he's feeling the game has moved beyond where he wants to be.
That wouldn't surprise me.
No, and he denies that, but he's kind of sloughed that off as, no, I'm not leaving because of the one and done era. It's just time to go. And I wonder, but he keeps saying and dinging hard on the NCAA. So it wouldn't shock me to see. And now I see, as of yesterday, the NCAA president just stepped down.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I did. Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah. So there's talk of whether the NCAA basketball in particular doesn't need an NBA type commissioner. And wouldn't Krzyzewski be the one and there's been talk about that is, the, whatever you want to call it, someone to head up the NCAA in particular, if not the NCAA at large. because it's really getting to points where I mean, this and on the NIL mode is
Right. I mean,
crazy.
that's changing everything as well,
Everything.
and influencing the transfer portal and recruiting. And I mean, some of these kids are like, it's like they're signing a pro contract.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And for some, and how long does it go before the quarterback at Alabama and Saban? I saw him. He was saying that we're going into dangerous territory here.
Yeah.
The quarterback, because he's the quarterback of Alabama, gets God knows how much money he makes with an NIL deal. And those offensive guards and tackles are going, yo,
right.
and now we're putting into tension, kind of the underlying thing. It goes through everything I think about, that Krzyzewski talked about. It goes back to the military. It is the mantra of the SEAL teams. That's why if you listen to any SEAL, they don't call themselves a SEAL. They call them, I'm a member of the teams. It's about the team. It is about the individuals being brought together to form a stronger entity that anyone or all five together could be. And when you start to give different incentives to, the quarterback, because he's the quarterback, are we losing that most core thing that I think sports brings us is, the teamwork.
Yeah, a little friction, a little division in the clubhouse.
Yes.
Like a 2-tier or 3-tiered kind of a situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that could be difficult, especially in college sports where
you
expect it's going to be a little more camaraderie and all for one and one for all. And
absolutely.
All that.
Absolutely. It's, I'm fine with, the hero worship. Okay, we get that. But, now you're putting dollars and cents on it.
Yeah.
And that's.
Well, on one hand, though, it's interesting because, those athletes, they're indirectly generating a tremendous amount of revenue.
Yes.
And they don't really get to participate as much in the share of it. So at some levels, it's perhaps justice, that they're going to have some compensation, but the system is perhaps not optimized right. It's going through growing pains.
Yes.
And so, it's going to distort things and it's going to make the whole landscape different.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why Krzyzewski is, he still has gas left in the tank. He can still coach.
He clearly does.
Yeah.
He, I don't know if you saw, I got a kick. They got him a present on his last day. The team did. And, and Shire was up there speaking for the team. And he said, we know that you still have it more in you, so you won't be able to coach us. So we have you won't be able to train this team anymore, but we have something else for you to train. And they brought out a little chocolate lab puppy named Coach.
Oh, perfect.
And I thought that's sweet. So do we have any questions that we blew off or haven't?
No, there's some here. It's a lot of comments, Pete Neal says, thank you for providing the context, exactly what I asked for in the question. Follow on, should law be part of police training?
Yes, and it is. Maybe not as much as one would think, but make no mistake about it. In the police academy, they are absolutely go through classes on things like the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure stuff. So yes, could there be more? I suspect so. I haven't gone through a police academy to really answer that definitively, but to answer your question, Peter, yes, law is part of it. And being that they are out there every day enforcing the law, it leads me to think we probably could do some more, and maybe more continuing training with them, with law enforcement agencies beyond just and they do have it. Don't mistake what I'm saying, but they probably could use ever more because they're the ones making calls every day. And, we talk about distinctions between reasonable suspicion and probable cause. There's a new law that, is potentially going to be passed by California state legislature that will preclude an officer from making a stop based on reasonable suspicion. That used to be the guiding term. What does that really mean? It depends on the facts of the case. But if a cop sees something that gives them what the court can call a reasonable suspicion, then they can detain someone and investigate further. This law will make that illegal. You can only do it if you have the next higher level, which is probable cause to believe that a crime actually occurred. And from the police agency or police entity, that is a crippling limitation. because the notion of a cop, I mean, let's face it, cops go on instinct a little bit, especially the more experienced ones. They've been around. They see something that doesn't look right, that might be suspicious. They want to investigate further. This will preclude them from doing that. They're going to have to derive this higher level of what we call probable cause. And the short version of that is enough facts to lead a reasonable person to believe, more probably than not, that a crime has just occurred. And that's what, that's a much higher standard for the police, and will preclude them from making stops they might otherwise make. The other thing is, if they make what we call pretext stops, a cop sees you've got a broken taillight, they can pull you over and then ask for your license stuff and so forth, and then can investigate further. Let's say they put down the window and they smell marijuana emanating. Well, now they have probably a probable cause even to believe that you're driving while under the influence of a drug, or they see bloodshot eyes. What this law will say is you cannot cite this person for anything beyond the reason that you stopped them for. In this case, a broken taillight. And you're going to have to walk away from what is a crime about to commit, namely someone who's impaired and going to keep driving. Go figure how the cops are going to work with that one. As I say, some of these laws, I see the reason they're pursuing them, but you got to think through how it plays out in the street. And I don't think that's what's happening. It's this, voice of reason mode of think about how that really works. So sorry to go too far on that. I did see Mr. Ed Franklin.
Yeah, you want to look at some of his here?
Well, only I see he said, I get the discretion, that discretion is a slippery slope. And Ed, if you're still there, of course it is. Which is why I don't say it lightly. But I guess if I have to choose between being hamstrung as a judge or having the discretion to make a call that someone can then question me on or appeal me and let a higher court decide whether I got it right, I'll opt to the latter. But to be limited to, follow this guideline put out by the legislature, I mean, you might as well have a robot do it. We can get AI to become judges. I'm not sure I want to see that day when we have AI-driven robots making what decisions the judges used to make. I like the fact that we answer to the people.
You can use judgment.
And gosh forbid, use judgment. Yes.
Right.
So, yeah. Anything else in there that you want to?
Just some interesting comments or some conversation amongst the people in the chat.
That's good.
Talking to each other. But I think we got most of the gist of the questions. These are all folks who are local here in our community that enjoy the podcast, and we've had an amazing conversation.
This is a blast. I love this. This is I have been asked about campaigning, and I can assure you, I'm not a politician because I can't stand campaigning as a general rule. How these like the Congress folks and run every 2 years is beyond me. I just don't know how they do it. I hope I never have to campaign again and I don't intend to. With that said, what I'm talking about is jumping through the hoops and raising money and talking, and going to this group and that group. But sitting down and talking to people, much like you and I are doing right now, is a real joy. As you can tell, I'm not shy. Yeah. I like to talk with people. I'm a personable person, and this is the interplay that I love. And so when I get the chance to be out in front of groups and just having these one-on-one discussions, it makes it all worth it.
Well, I think it's great for you to do this on the campaign trail because people sometimes don't get to know judges.
Absolutely.
They're up on a pedestal, and they're a little bit cloaked to a degree. They're emotionless at times.
Yes.
Now we're kind of getting to understand your perspective, how you perceive the world. And I think that's so helpful because I admitted to you last time when you were here that I struggle at the ballot box when it's time to vote for a judge.
Most do.
Because I know a traditional politician, I know where they line up on the issues.
Yes,
But with judges, I sometimes don't.
you're right.
But you have to maybe as a voter do more due diligence to learn more about what makes that judge tick,
Right.
rather than what's his position on this issue or that issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of it you can see through their experience, their life experience, their professional experience, and some of it's just talking to them and spending a little effort to, all of it is useful. I hope none of it becomes, the linchpin. In other words, it is by definition a nonpartisan race, so you're never going to see a political party affiliation, but make no mistake about it, the political parties are weighing in at different places. So that may be important to you or not. The Union Tribune will weigh in and produce their answers to questions. I think they'll do an endorsement or not. The county bar will make an evaluation, none of which should be, oh, that's it. It's collecting all of it and then making your own independent decision. When I'm out there, I really believe, and I say this, I believe strongly, I think it maybe is apparent in the justice system. I'm passionate about it. And I also believe that good judges can make it work and bad judges can destroy it. And that's why this position is so critical. That and the fact that they're literally making decisions every single day that impact people's lives. So if we all could agree that it's a really important position, then you want to pick someone who you think is going to do a good job. And so you have to do a little more research than you might otherwise, that may be less than obvious. You got to look behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to do that. I say this to every group I talk to, read up, do your research, please. I wouldn't say that. Oh, and then I say, and then you vote for whoever you think is the best one for the position. And I'm fine with that. If that's not me, so be it. I'm fine with that. Now, I wouldn't say that if I didn't think that if you do that, I know where you'll come out. I believe if you look into all the things that matter. But it is about being, we don't even have to spend, some people will spend hours and hours doing research. Okay, that's wonderful. But just be an informed electorate. You have this right called the right to vote. Exercise it and exercise it with a little bit of information. In the last election, the last primary, we have 1.9, give or take, million registered voters here in the county of San Diego. And in case I didn't make it clear, this is a county-wide vote for judge.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge county.
Yeah.
Side note, I think my largest campaign expenditure will be the gas in my car with gas prices the way they are, because I am on the road all the time. But anyway, 1.9 million registered voters. In the last primary, about 900,000, a little bit, maybe close to 1 million actually voted, which is, kind of sad to me. 1.9, that's, 60% ish. Some would say that's actually a pretty good turnout. No,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Of those that actually voted, 40% of them did not cast a vote for judge. 40%. So there were only 600,000, give or take, votes for judge. I understand why, but if you agree with me that it's an important position, and you agree with me that it's important that we think about who we put there, then for gosh sakes, do a little bit of research and make that choice. Exercise your vote.
You're right.
And vote for somebody that, the best of your research can tell you in the limited time is the one. And I think we've lost some of our excuses because those ballots will show up in your mailbox. The little county pamphlet will be and you can read our ballot statements. Every one of us, you had to pay for it, a ridiculous amount. Mm-hmm. Side note, $16,000 to put 200 words in that little book.
Really?
Yes. That's what it cost me just to get in the book.
Wow.
Yeah. It's not a inexpensive proposition.
Well, there's a lot of printing and postage, but 16,000.
16,000
like
because it's countywide.
Yeah.
And it's printing, postage, and translated into, I think they go to 5 languages or something like that. But so whether that's justifiable, here's my problem with that. I can come up with that and raise funds and my own money, but that's a big obstacle for some people.
Oh yeah.
And if people are precluded from running for office simply because of money, then we're not doing now we're talking my whole other issue about campaign finance reform and really one of our biggest problems, I think. But so it is that notion of do the little bit of research, read this pamphlet, and then make as best informed decision as you can. But these positions matter, and they matter to you because you go, well, I don't go to court. Well, okay, hopefully you're never in a criminal court. What if you get sued? What if you got to sue your neighbor? What if, you have a child or a grandchild who ends up in juvenile court? What if, God forbid, you're in the middle of a divorce, or there's child custody issues, or your kids have child custody? All of these decisions are being made by one person, not a committee of the, city council, not the legislature, one judge. And before you let that happen, at least feel like you weighed in on who that person is, because most of the judges on the bench are not elected. They're appointed, and they're appointed to fill a term, whatever term they're filling, a judge may retire midterm. We didn't really talk about this. If they retire midterm in the middle of their 6-year term, that seat is open for appointment, and almost all of them occur that way. And those are all appointed by the governor. So,
and then if they're an incumbent, they generally don't have a challenger.
Right. So we only get, you get to vote for 2 judges this time. All the ones, and there's a lot of retirements going on, those will all be done by one person, namely the governor. And whether you agree or disagree with the governor, that's just reality. He has his own perspective, I assume, on how things should be. I can look at the numbers and know that he's not, most of his appointees are very young. Does he want a legacy? I don't know. I guess maybe he thinks that's better. Okay. And he's the governor, so he gets to choose that. I know this, in all of his time there, he's never appointed a vet to the bench. Not one.
Really?
Not one.
God, you think with so many veterans in California, you'd want to check that box at some point.
Yeah. It's, do I think that he's purposely not appointing vets? No, I have no way to say that. But again, I think he has a perspective on who he wants to put on the bench. And as the governor, he gets to do that. When these seats come up for election as the electorate, now you get to weigh in on that.
Right.
And that's all I'm suggesting is,
well, we already got one person that's weighed in. Is Peter Neild.
Yep.
And he said, thank you, Peter. You have my vote. Okay.
Peter, thank you. That's one down. And I figure, if I do the numbers, 300,000 to win it outright in June. So 299,999 to go. So okay. I thank you for that.
Well, 98, because I want to be voting for you as well.
And I think my wife will vote for me. So see, we're chinking it down a little bit at a time. Really, thank you, Peter. I really appreciate your time. And I know you keep in close touch with John here. So thanks for your engagement. It's really, really important. This is how our community operates at its best.
So what's next on the campaign trail? You got to get in your car and spend $40.
I was already at a women's club in Del Mar this morning, or over the lunch hour. Then I came here, and now I'm on to the American Legion post in Poway.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've gone to a bunch of, being the only vet in both races. It doesn't matter really, I guess, in the other race, but I'm the only vet. Veterans are becoming fewer and farther between. There's less and less on the bench. Like I said, the judge who is retiring that asked me to run is a vet, but again, I don't say, "Ooh, you must be a veteran." I just think it's a little slice that's a good add to a person's experience, especially in a role of judge. And that's why I keep playing it up a bit. I wear my little naval aviator pin there, and so I've been going around to a lot of the American Legion VFW posts. And I'll tell you, this is the thing you mentioned on before, talking with people. Just to sit, I was up at the Fallbrook VFW. No surprise, all Marines.
Right.
But these guys, they rolled in because I had met Master Gunnery Sergeant. He said, "Oh yeah, come by. I make a mean Bloody Mary," and he wasn't kidding. He made a mean Bloody Mary, and so I went up there and. Lunchtime on Sunday, and a whole bunch of these guys show up. They're all now former Marines, most, retired or not, some of them out on disability. Every one of them 5, 6, 7 tours in Fallujah, Anbar province, you name it. They're in this environment where they can make the jokes. Like they call one guy, "Oh, that's Rocket." I'm like, yeah, he had an RPG go through his leg. I'm like, oh my God. But I was talking to this master gunnery sergeant. He said to me, Pete, when we go out to this day, and he's got, we calls them zipper scars. I mean, he literally got ripped all the way up his body by an IED that he stepped on. And you just go, man, where do these guys come from? And the answer is they come from right here. This is why I love this country. I mean, people will go to war for what we believe in, and part of that's the right to vote. So exercise it. But to listen to him, he says, when I go out, I always sit with my, facing the door. He goes, it's just, I can't get beyond the anxiety, and that's the only way I can go. He goes, until I come in here. And the VFW up there, it's actually, they got this really cool bar, but it's a little ramshackle place. And he goes, but in here with these guys, I don't think about that door. I don't care. Because
everyone's got each other's back.
They got each other's back.
Yeah.
And I talked to another guy who they told me, he kind of a soft-spoken guy. Tony was his name. And they said, he didn't tell you, but he's a former Marine recon and then Marine Raider, which is their special forces. He said he used a phrase that they use, he's stacked more bodies than you can count. And I'm like, oh my. But he was saying to me, I've just kind of given up on most of this. I just do my thing. And most of these guys came in wearing their leathers and their Harleys, they're, now they've grown the beard and the hair and they're looking pretty wild. And they're like, we know that, but it's just letting it go a bit. And he was saying, I just focus on this. And I said to him, Tony, the thing that kept you going over there is what we should try to hold on to here, which is look out for the guy next to you. That's what it's all about, right? If we just look out for each other, we actually show some respect for each other and care about each other as a community, and stop this disgusting divisiveness that we're seeing all the time. And realize we're all in this together. We can disagree vehemently on all kinds of stuff, but we got to keep the conversation going and know that, things like, do we all want to be safe? Of course, so let's stop bashing each other over the head about defund the police or, support the police. I mean, we can all agree on certain basic things, I think. And so when I said that to him, he said, okay, I'll keep that in mind, but it is a core of that's what made them survive. I know that, which is you can't worry about the higher policies of why you're over there. You're about making sure he comes home next to me.
Right.
I take care of you. You take care of me. We look out for each other, never leave a brother behind, period. And, we can carry that into the community of, it can go all the way down when we look in the streets and see these people homeless and we should clean the street. Okay. People who are citizens should have the right to walk down the street and not step through human waste.
Right.
In the same breath, these people should not be thrown in some concentration camp. But we need to do something to provide a better life for them. No one can tell me when they say, well, it's, unfair to force them to move off the street, living in literal squalor and disease. That's not good for anyone. It's not good for society. It's not good for the people there. So why can't we all agree that that is not okay? I mean, having literal tent encampments along the streets where you can't walk through Balboa Park and feel feel safe because you don't know what's behind half these tents. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that we can't all agree that's not good, because
it's maybe the pendulum has swung too far again, right?
That's part of that pendulum.
So how do we have a smart solution to homelessness? And it's a very complex issue.
Very complex.
But, I think you've alluded to, I think it was on our previous podcast, how PTSD plays a role in homelessness.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's one of many factors.
And
again, that's where your background as a veteran gives you additional insight into rendering justice.
Yeah, there's, and I don't want to go on too long, but, within the courts, and I'm a big fan of these, we've done these. It actually was mostly started by a deputy DA, now retired, a close friend of mine, big supporter of mine. But it's called the collaborative courts. And in the collaborative courts, we have one for mental health, homeless, vets, and drugs. And so they're all lower level crimes that people have committed in one form or another. Homeless person who committed a low level theft, but the real issue is they're homeless out there. If you can get them into that program, the goal is to treat them, monitor them. They are very strict programs. The Veterans Court is a great example. And in time, move them out of that and then leave the criminal justice system behind, so much that literally their charge, again, these are low-level crimes, can be dismissed, gone away, because they've now been given the tools to actually move on and become a productive citizen. A gentleman who's Judge Roger Crowell, ex-Army guy, started the Veterans Court. I talked to him 2 years ago when I was running, and he asked me, he said, when we started the Veterans Court, what do you think the recidivism rate was? Now, we use that term a lot in the criminal courts. I mean, and like up at major felony criminals, the recidivism rate's kind of crazy. I mean, someone goes to prison, they come back, the recidivism rate is around 70%.
Like
I mean,
boomerang.
yeah, they just, we call it doing life term on the installment plan, yeah. And those people are just hell-bent on committing crimes. And we need to recognize those people and say, no, you're getting removed from society. I'm tired of you victimizing law-abiding citizens. That's got to stop. But when we see someone who, like a veteran who maybe through PTSD item or issue is committed a low-level assault or a theft, and we can get them into a program and treat those issues and monitor them closely, and they meet with a judge who oversees the collaborative courts. And you mess up, you're going to go spend some time in jail. I mean, so there is a hammer over their head. And he asked me what that recidivism rate is, and I said, I'm betting it's pretty low. Thinking 70% was that. Okay, and low level crime probably less. Okay, but vets 25%. He goes, Pete, it's zero. I said zero. He goes, not one. In the 2 years he had been running it. He said, now he's left it. This was about 2 years ago, maybe a little less. He said he'd left it, and he goes, they've percolated up. Now the judge who's running it is not a veteran. So maybe, is that why? I don't know. And I would not want to ding them for that, but that's just reality. It's percolated up a little bit, but it's still exceptionally low. So the read on that is it works. It works. That's so good. Why wouldn't we devote resources to that kind of stuff? And again, I'm not talking about the ones who are child molesters and rapists. And I mean, that's a different world. I mean, people who are like, get someone off the streets who's got mental health issues, treat their mental health, get them in a program. And it's like, well, that costs money. Well, we're spending a fortune right now.
Right.
I mean, so it's spending it better. It's getting smart on crime. That's what I talk about.
Not tough on crime, but
tough is too easy. That's just a buzz term. Oh, I'm tough on crime. Okay, of course you are. I mean, who isn't? Who's going to get up there and say, well, I'm easy on crime? Well, maybe George Gascon up there is up in LA has decided.
I won't name any names, but often the people that say they're the toughest on crime often are not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And and to recognize these kinds of programs represent kind of a win-win. We can save money, take someone out of out of an ongoing cycle of problems, and God, if we could have even a recidivism rate of only 25%, we're getting 75% of them to move forward into a productive life. That's a win.
Huge,
big win. Sadly, Judge Crowell just died last summer, because I would have loved to first win the bench and love to do some work in the collaborative courts, what he started. But it's it's those kinds of things that I think there's reason for hope. We can do some things, and some of these cases we can segue through this system and find ways to handle more of the charges. But we'll see. I mean, the reality is, with the emergency orders coming off, meaning there's no now constitutional right or statutory right given by the Supreme Court to continue cases out. due to the emergency. So now you have an absolute right to be tried within X amount of days. And unless the defendant agrees to waive that time, they must be tried within the number of days. The remedy is dismiss the case.
But aren't we near that deadline
We
now?
are very quickly near
Yeah.
that deadline.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because I haven't looked at it close enough. If the emergency orders came off tomorrow, does that mean then the 30-day or 60-day time to trial commences? Or has it already commenced? I mean, to me, that's
going to be a big problem when they lift it.
Whether once those orders come off, we've got a big problem. Whether it's going to hit in 30 days, 60 days, or right away, it's a big problem. And if they don't waive time, which is the defendant's right, then we either find them at trial court or dismiss their case. There isn't an option. There isn't send them to Orange County or something. Something must be done.
Wow.
And maybe that's a mad scramble by the DA's office to resolve these cases at they're already, and that's why I say most of the cases that can be resolved have been, because I know this, and I don't fault them. Don't get me wrong. The DA's office has given offers on cases well below what they would have done before to try to move through cases.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And that makes sense. You've got to move these cases. You have to. You may not want to, but you have to. And they did so, and they've been doing that. But at a certain point, they're not going to let a second-degree murder case go off for probation.
Right.
And so you either try that person or they're going to walk.
It's a big risk.
It's a big risk.
Yeah.
It's a big risk. And again, I don't have those solutions. I just want to be part of the solution.
I wonder if some, criminals that are legit guilty but haven't been tried yet, if they can play the game in such a way it's almost like a game of chicken. Like I won't extend it. I'm near the deadline. So you either need to try me or release me.
And there's no doubt that will happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely no doubt. It's, and I don't even know that it's, what you might say, they play the game. The defense lawyers, look, their job as a defense lawyer is to do whatever is necessary within ethical guidelines in the best interest of your client. And if the answer is to go, you know what, we're going to wait till that time and then not waive time, knowing they can't get, because we can read, because I'm in the public defender's office, for example, and I see we've got all these cases that are more serious. They got to get them. They're never going to get to yours. So you're not waiving time. And we're going to take the risk that we won't accept that really good offer they've made. We're going to force their hand and see if they can get us to trial. And if they can on that X day, then you're going to walk. Mm-hmm. Now, the risk you run is, guess what? We just found a courtroom for you.
Yeah, right.
And you're like, whoa, I want that deal.
It's
gone.
Yeah.
So there's some.
But there's some of that gamesmanship, I'm sure, is being calculated.
Oh, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And you're talking, and we're not talking about, do I get, a fine of $500 or $250? You're talking about, 15 years versus, we're going to offer you 6. I mean, 6 years in prison. I mean, people go, that's kind of low. Have you spent one night in jail? I mean, I've been in that jail, not as an inmate, but, seeing defendants, because I've handled pro per cases and so forth. I wouldn't want to spend one night. Not one. I mean, it's a scary place to be. And, the people say, oh my God, he only got a year. I mean, like the cop. I'm like, okay, a year and by definition, he'll be what we call ADSEC, administrative segregation, which means he's in essentially solitary confinement for a year, because they can't have him in the prison, in the regular population. He's a cop.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He'll get shanked. There's no doubt about it. And so, for people that say to me, oh, he only got a year. I'm like, you want to spend a year in jail? Yeah. Have at it.
Right.
It's not a pretty place for some people who are been in and out, piece of cake. I've been there before. I'll go back and get, 3 hots and a cot, I mean, but, so the criminal justice system is an interesting place. But again, it's not just that's half of our court's business. Half. I mean, civil jury trials, probate issues, family law I talked about, juvenile cases that, these are all been subject to the difficulties caused by the pandemic. So that's why I say I would not have wanted. We have a new presiding judge as of January of this year. So Judge Smith is coming out of, he's now in charge of the courts. Interesting place to be, because technically judges don't report to him. He doesn't hire and fire them because they're elected or appointed by the governor or elected by the people, right? So it's kind of an administrative supervisor, which is a difficult position. It's kind of like, I need you to go here, and what if they say I don't want to go there? I mean, I'm ordering you. You can't really do that. So when one has to operate in that amongst all of the issues that the court has had to deal with, I wouldn't want that job right now. And before him, the previous presiding judge is the one who brought us through the pandemic, and no one we've not experienced that in our lifetime. So any attempt to criticize what could have, should have, would have done, I step away from, because you know what, that's unheard of crises.
Right.
The former presiding is worried about, keeping people safe, court employees not getting COVID. I mean, I couldn't begin to imagine what she's dealt with for 2 full years, or did deal with. So, so I don't want to ever say what a cause might be. I just know we've ended up with this ungodly amount of backlog that is now the next crisis for the courts. If the pandemic was a crisis, well, now here's our new one, is the spin out from it. And we don't have a choice but to deal with it.
And you're ready to go.
There would be a lot easier things to do than what I'm doing. I could do what I'm doing right now. And as a judge who retired last year, who was head of family law, presiding family law, Margot Lewis Hoy, is, a little plug, big supporter, and it has endorsed me. But she said to me, "Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this job?" I mean, and I said, it's not so much a want. I just don't feel like I can walk away. When Judge Joe called me, I said, how do I say no to that?
Right.
And I know that sounds so, oh my God, what a Boy Scout, like poly purebred, whatever you want to throw at me, I'm fine. That's true. That's just the truth. It's just who I am. I can't walk away from a system that I think I can help. And
because you're passionate about justice, it's been your career, your life's work. Now here's an opportunity to really kind of go out on top,
and help out. And you're right in that for 31 years, it's a system I've been in. And if I can't devote something, something that I think I have to offer to help, then shame on me. So there is a part of it that's self-serving. It's my way of giving back to a system that has been everything I've done for 31 years.
Well, and even now, right now, you're doing that in your private practice, working with young attorneys. So you're kind of doing it anyway.
That's true. And I, you know what, if this doesn't work out, I'm totally fine with that. Sure. As the administrator of this firm said to me, Pete, personally, we'll do everything we can to support you. I hope you lose. I said, I think that's a compliment. But I, I could be in a much worse place than being able to just stay with this group, because it's a great firm. Anybody needs family law work, Cajun Miles, there you go. There's their plug. But they really are great lawyers, a great environment, 2 women owned and operated.
Wow.
It's an awesome firm. And I was so excited to start, working with their lawyers and then to something we didn't touch. I want to grow some practice areas for them. That's one of the reasons they want me to come in. One of which, and I hope I don't keep going on forever here, but
we'll go as long as you like.
All right. Is, we talked about this, not just to be, the chief trial counsel, work with their younger lawyers, because I think I have a lot to add. In family law, it's a little looser. It tends to be. And some of them get a little hung up on things like the evidence code. And, as a trial lawyer, criminal trial lawyer in particular, I mean, you've got to be well-versed in the evidence code and working with it on your feet every day. So, I can play that back and help them with those issues and how to deal with the courts. And, when, oh my God, the judge guys, okay, I think I have a different view on things that might help you here, how you might present this motion, issue, whatever it may be. And so that all by itself is really exciting to me. But then we talked about a couple of areas. There's a lot of things I could do, but I want to focus on one area that I think is really a need. It's elder abuse, but in the civil litigation arena, filing lawsuits on behalf of seniors who've been defrauded or abused or whatever the case may be. I've done that in the criminal arena. And what I know is in really egregious cases, they get criminal prosecution. It takes a long time, sometimes way too long. But there are cases that kind of go under the table because, well, there's too much complexity here. It may or may not be criminal action, but there's still enough grounds there for a civil lawsuit. And we have this thing called the ADACPA, the Elder Abuse and Dependent Adult Care Act, whatever. But that has some interesting provisions to it, not the least of which is if you sue somebody for elder abuse and prevail, not only do you prevail on whatever the damages are, but attorney's fees are included. So, there's a way to kind of pay for those actions on people who couldn't otherwise really cover it. And you'd be amazed at the level of, I'll call it crap out there, what people are doing, in particular to seniors. And it's become worse during the pandemic. The scams, the sweetheart deals, they're just rampant. And if I've seen one, I've seen dozens of people, sometimes family members, distant ones come in, someone who's in a facility, but oh, by the way, they own their house. Well, it's nothing special, except it's in San Diego, which last I checked, our median price is $800 or something. And they find a way to get them to sign off on a quitclaim deed. And all of a sudden there goes $800,000 worth of home that they didn't even know what they were doing.
Do you ever watch Better Call Saul?
I have not seen that. I've seen it advertised on Netflix. We've spent more time paying attention. I think it's Netflix or Amazon. Yeah. But I haven't seen an episode.
Or have you seen Breaking Bad at all?
I've seen a little bit of that.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Better Call Saul is the prequel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And
okay.
Saul, I'm going to get back. It connects to elder abuse.
All right.
But Saul Goodman's real name is Jimmy McGill. And when he practiced law, he got traction in his career working on behalf of senior citizens. And there was a big case in the Better Call Saul called the Sandpiper case, which was an assisted living home that was nickel and diming their residents for all these fees that didn't seem like that much, but it added up a lot. And they had facilities in multiple states, and it turned into this really big class action lawsuit.
Okay.
And, again, Better Call Saul is, kind of a crazy show. So, but the point is that when I was watching it, I was like, I remember Pete was doing something with elder abuse.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing, okay, Better Call Saul is kind of crazy, but this is a legit issue.
Yes.
And there are people that are being scammed, and especially where to qualify for certain government programs, you have to have like lesser assets.
Right.
So there are incentives to I guess liquidate assets.
Yeah.
So then people can be on those programs, but it might be manipulated by the healthcare provider.
Oh yeah.
To distort it to maximize their position at the expense of the patient.
Absolutely.
And their own nest egg.
Yes.
And it can be, this is a big deal. And these elderly folks, they don't read the fine print.
No. And it's, like I said, it's rampant in every area, whether it be seniors in their own home that, are reliant on some people, or people who are in a facility, and that may be skilled nursing is the highest level, but it could be an assisted living or a board and care. And they have access to people who, at least my distorted view, because of what I've been doing for 10 years now, and then even as a DA, is, elder abuse criminal prosecution. It seems like every other person walking in the door is one of these, which is, how do I separate that person from their money? And I have a sense that there's this attitude of, oh my God, they're going to die, and I could really use the money. As if that's acceptable. And, you just see stuff that is mind-boggling. What people will do to people generally, but in particular to vulnerable seniors, that really boils my blood. And I know, that most egregious cases, we can get them picked up by the criminal, because I did it as a DA and as an AG. But there's a lot that, let's say someone, what we call undue influence, someone wheedles themselves into the life of somebody, ends up essentially getting them to sign over assets and so forth. The court has ruled that undue influence alone, without blatant fraud or misrepresentation, it is not a crime. And so the criminal authorities, the law enforcement, DA, AG, said won't go anywhere with that case, because it's not a crime. But who's going to run to the, to help with civil litigation? And there are quite a few, not quite a few, but there are a few lawyers, law firms have kind of made a niche of suing nursing homes, basically. Why? Nursing homes, big entities, big dollars, see some really egregious thing in a nursing home with people not being cared for adequately, they sue. Okay. But what about all these people who've had life savings wheedled away from them, a home, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. And you can go, well, you win that money back, or at least some of it. I mean, my thought of this is, if we can get in there, drop a lawsuit, and then there are provisions that people tend not to push on, is with a senior, I'm going to get priority in a courtroom because the statutes provide that I get priority, and start pushing the pressure onto these people to go, you better resolve this. And why is that good? So I get money? No, it means you're paying my attorney's fees and you're paying back the money. It may not be a lot in the grand scheme of things, but a couple $1,000s or $20,000 to a senior in a facility who may only have a year or two left in life, to get their money back, or at least a large portion of it, because you were able to move fast, much faster, that you can with some of the vehicles available. So, these are the things I've been kind of wrestling with. This is an interesting area I'd like to develop, and where we go with it, like I said, with some of the lawyers in this firm, I mean, I can expose them to different areas than they have known. They're mostly doing family law. Some want to branch out, and this is a way to do that, so that I'm not just running as a solo guy. Now I've got this law firm that's totally psyched behind it. And so that's one area. And the other is, because I've seen this medical or licensing defense, which is largely held, if you're a doctor, psychologist, nurse, they come after your license if there's some level of negligence or whatever. And that's handled ultimately by a division in my office. But it's all in the administrative courts, and I know there's not many lawyers out there working in this area. And what I know, though, and it's anecdotal, there was someone who came to me years ago and we talked about it, who's a psychologist, and as he said, what wouldn't I pay to save my license? I mean, it's my bread and butter. And I realize there's a real need for people in that. And in the administrative courts, which I've done work in as well, completely separate from the Superior Court, is a whole different can of worms. I mean, it's a lot more informal. The administrative judges they're appointed by the county, or the state, as the case may be, but it's basically like applying for a job. There's no a governor appointment or election or anything like that. So these are, I'm sure, great, but I've seen, wow, this is a little loose and fast in here. And to bring some serious lawyering into that, to people who are going, I'm a nurse, and if I lose my license because of what they're alleging, I'm done. All I've trained to do. And again, if there's a mistake made, then they live with it. But too many times it's that apparatus of the state mode. I mean, people need help. I mean, because the threat is either accept our plea or face going to trial. And guess what? We have unlimited resources.
Yeah.
Which is always struck me as.
And then suddenly they're no longer a nurse.
Yes.
And they're accused of something that they didn't really even do. They just happen to be part of the system at the time.
Right. Or it's misinterpreted.
Or they made a mistake.
Right. Made a mistake. I mean, there was a case, now it's not here, it was in the East Coast. A nurse was charged, I probably won't get this exactly right, but I think it was she was exhausted, had other issues going on. She grabbed the wrong vial and administered drugs to a patient in a facility that was the wrong stuff, and it killed them.
Yeah.
And you're like, woof, you better be ready.
My wife and I were just talking about this case.
Yes.
And she was prosecuted criminally. And she's in jail. And it was a mistake. It was an error.
A bad error. And
Right.
maybe she should lose her license. Look, at some point,
Yeah.
you know, that's a bridge too far. You know, that's just so egregious. And the facility, you know, there's big money to be paid. But criminal, go sit in jail as a nurse for trying to do your best and screwing up. You know, boy, I always like to think, what are really the consequences of that? No surprise, nurses are starting to go, you know what? Just like the cop on the street, I'm not responding to that call so that what? I can get charged with a crime for pulling my weapon on somebody. You know what? I'm going to wait till we have more enforcement here. You know, back in the day, I mean, you know, a domestic violence call, cop in a solo car shows up, here's a scuffle, they're going in.
Right.
Now the incentive is, oh no, I don't know what's behind there, but I'm waiting until I get 4 more cars here. And then in the meantime, what's happening behind those closed doors? And that's what I say. I mean, be careful what you're trying to create, because you have to understand how that plays out. Now, whether it's a cop on the street or a nurses who start to say, you know what, it's not worth it. They don't pay me enough money to work these hours
Right.
to then what? Get charged with a crime?
Yeah.
If I make a mistake?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm incredibly sorry, but I'm sitting in jail?
Yeah.
You know, that's what I say, boy. And it is, again, that bit of being a defense lawyer, knowing what it means to face the apparatus of the state and to know to never treat that lightly. And that's my concern about people who've only been a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And I can speak to this because I was one for 20 years. I mean, I get it. But you've got to have an appreciation that that is such a huge force coming down on one person to feel like the entire state and every, you know, and there is no cost. I used to always think I'm a custodian of the people's money. I mean, people say, well, whatever, let's just go order that. I said, like, you know, that costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, you're not paying it. I said, I'm a citizen, so I'm paying for it. I mean, we're not going to, you know, have some expert, you know, do with something that's worthless to me and spend all this money just because it's not coming out of my checkbook. But there, I guarantee you, there is a mentality of, well, that's that funny money, you know, it's government money.
Well, good on you for having that integrity.
Well, and part of it just takes being around, being a defense lawyer, kind of seeing it enough to go, no, I see what that means. And, you know, when a prosecution comes in, you know, I'm going to give them all the deference in the world that they are entitled to, but no more. I mean, I'm not going to, you know, let them go, you know, we're the only one who wears white hats, so we get away with whatever. No, that defense lawyer is doing a pretty hell of a job too, representing their client as best they can. And that's what the system needs to have, is that balance. And I think that's what a lot of people worry about currently in the criminal justice system. It's not balanced. There isn't a balance. There is such a heavy hand of the state. And that doesn't mean that you can make that go away, and give the same level of resource. I don't know how to do that. It's just a recognition of it. And let's start with that understand that when I issue a case against somebody and I decide to charge, you know, 17 charges, most of them which are duplicative and have a huge bail amount, to go, okay, what really happened here? But you're using the system, and do not think for a second this does not happen. Prosecutors charge multiple crimes, whatever can fit the facts, because it's a leverage. It's a bargaining tool. We'll let you plead to one, but you're going to accept the sentence where, you know, and I go, wow. I mean, that's because the alternative is, okay, go to trial and face all 17 and see where that lands you. And again, that starts to, you know, really skew the matter. It is exactly why we got to the zero bail, because we would arrest people, get a bail, and then try to pump it up. Why? If they're in custody, they're going to plead, because the sooner they plead, the sooner their time starts to count and they're going to get out. And how many people have pled guilty, even though they didn't do it? We don't know. But they did, you know what? They gave me a deal, put me on probation for 3 years, serve, credit for the time I've already served, and I'm out. Okay, except this minor detail. You didn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, the defense mode, the defund, people saw that, and they're not wrong. That was happening. I know it was happening. I've seen it happen in person. That leverage of high bail will force the plea. But that can't be the reason we do that.
No.
It never should be. The two reasons: danger to the community and to ensure they return to court.
Right.
There's no part of that says, and to help coerce a plea.
Right.
But that's happened. It has definitely happened, and it's happened more often than we care to think. And again, can I change that? Well, it's already gone to the zero bail. What I see is both sides of that. And that's what I hope is the perspective we want to put in a judge on the bench.
That's a huge,
so at least see it.
A huge selling point for you is that you've seen both sides.
Yeah, I hope. I hope we can convince all 1.9 or 1 million or even 600,000 of them out.
So, how can people reach you if they want to ask you a question or contact you? What's the best way?
The best way is through my website. Is easy one: www.pete4judge. All words, no numbers in there. So Pete, F-O-R, all together, pete4judge.com.
That sounds pretty easy to me. How can you forget that?
I hope not. There's, sure enough, I had a traffic commissioner who's also filed in my seat. So I have two opponents, and his name is Peter, his first name. So kind of wedged in on my brand of Pete, but he doesn't call himself Pete. So I'm the only Pete out there. So pete4judge.com. And there's a way where someone can either email, or you can just write anything they want to write.
Fill out a form. And
it's ask a question or submit a question, whatever it is, right through the website. It comes right to me. So that's probably the easiest way. I'd go on about my, I give out my, if you ever see an email from me, it has my personal email address on it and my cell phone. So I take calls all the time, but that's the easiest way for,
and you're off to the VFW tonight
to go see the boys down at the Poway VFW. So, I'm in town tonight, which is nice.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
So you've been in Vista, you've been in Del Mar, you've been covering the whole county.
Oh, yeah, South Bay. I'm endorsed by Chula Vista Police Officer Association, by the way.
You have a very impressive endorsement list.
It's purposeful in that two things. One, I have some organizations that are of note that, because they wanted to interview and so forth. So I certainly pursued that, and I'm honored to have it. One in particular, the Lawyers Club, which is their mission is to elevate the role of women in law and society. It is an incredibly powerful, strong organization that I've watched grow from, you may remember Congressman Lynn Shank, if you remember that name, and Justice Judith McConnell, two women, believe it or not, there are some people older than me, that started out in this industry were told, you can't be lawyers, you can be secretaries, even though they had a law degree, and way back when, and they years ago bonded together with some others and formed this group as kind of a mutual support. It now is, I don't know the numbers, well over 6, and they might have 1,000 lawyers. They don't limit themselves. I mean, it is predominantly women, but they don't, you can, and I did join as a male. And they're very active, very powerful, very bright. And I give them credit for being a force, and they have become a force in the legal industry. Absolutely. In this town. So they interviewed all of us and did a fairly extensive vetting, and I was honored to receive their support from Lawyers Club. Yeah.
It was making me remember the movie about Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes.
When she was the only woman in the class.
Absolutely. And there's some of these women I'm meeting. I say to them, I'm blown away to watch what you've done. And I go, and it's not just me going, oh, hooray for women. That benefits me as it does you. By elevating women, I think we elevate ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think you would agree with that. So for me, it's somewhat selfish. I think it elevates us all by, look, I've got a daughter and a wife. They're both professionals. And I've always said, I don't want them to ever feel that there's an obstacle in front of them because they're female.
Right.
And for no other reason. And
Exactly.
the same with your daughter, as you've told me all the great things she's doing. Clearly you've taught her that and she's learned it.
Yeah.
Because she's going hard. And so that's, that's one. And the Chula Vista police officers is, completely different group. And the Lincoln Club of San Diego, which is nonpartisan, but tends to be rather conservative business interests. They've endorsed me. The Latino American Political Association has endorsed me. So I have these organizations, but my real focus is on individuals, people who absolutely know me. So guys like Bob Brewer, who was the U.S. attorney here up until recently, his wife, who's a big supporter, but cannot endorse because of her role. She's a retired federal judge, the first Latina judge ever appointed to the federal district court, and was chief judge here in the federal district court here in Southern California. She's now retired, but she's in a position of with a private mediation group, and they don't want them to be political. So
yeah, sure.
One could find out her name. It wouldn't be hard. But she's supportive. To the number two in the district attorney's office up until recently, the assistant district attorney, now he just retired. He's endorsed me, notwithstanding there's a young deputy DA in my race. The chief of the North County division of the district attorney's office, I tried a case against him in my private practice. He is not only a friend, but has endorsed me, notwithstanding the deputy DA in this race. And a bunch of others, Rear Admiral Pat McGrath, Captain Lindsay, former head of CO of Special Warfare Group BUDS. I've known him since the day we showed up at ROTC orientation back at Duke. Neil Smith, former member of SEAL Team 6, recently retired from CEO of Comcast.
Oh, wow.
And is now a board member at Qualcomm. And he too, the three of us, all joined ROTC 42 years ago.
Nice.
And I take great pride in that because these are people who've known me that whole time and stand behind me. So I've tried to do that, to reach both sides. So I've got, prosecutors, and Randy Mize, the public defender, has endorsed me. So
right on.
People go, how does that? I go, because I think he knows what I bring to the table, the things we're talking about.
And all the groups you share with me is a pretty diverse group as well.
Yes.
Politically diverse, ethnically diverse, gender diverse, everything. So I was going down the list, and our mutual friend Damon Mosler was on that list too.
Yeah,
so
he sure was.
He
sure was.
So I saw him a few weeks ago. So he was very excited about your campaign.
He is a great friend and a great person and an outstanding lawyer. The district attorney's office is less now that he's retired. He had a full career there and did a lot of really good work. He's a great guy.
I agree, 100%.
How did you meet him?
We went to college together.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We were in the same fraternity.
Oh, so you know him going back.
Yeah, we know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
And, as we're adults and family, you kind of drift apart, and every once in a while you cross paths.
That's right.
But, he's a A1 quality guy. He's always been that way. And when he decided to go and be a district attorney, I was like, hey, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's been there a long time. He's been in a lot of important positions. He was head of special operations, which is always a funky unit because you investigate cop shootings and internal affairs type stuff. And, he did some really interesting work. If anyone wanted to research, they could find out. I mean, Damon, but because he's that guy, he doesn't get caught up in politics. He just, stuck to the mandate of what a public prosecutor must do and should always do. And Damon never strayed from that. I think the world of him. He's a great guy. And it's a real pleasure to have. He was in my class when we joined the DA's office. There weren't that many of us, but we became DAs together back in 1992.
Because you guys were, is it a freshman class or a rookie class? What do you call it?
We just called it the class. I mean, I think it was at that time there maybe one a year. And so Rear Admiral Pat McGrath, who is just retired also from the DA's office. He had a full career as a DA, but then stayed in the reserves. He and I actually flew together in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we joined the DA's office in that same class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, so Pat's a big backer. Brent Neck, who's the one who ran the collaborative courts, who's now retired. So I take great pride in long-term deputy DAs who know what the work is there and what someone like me represents to them. And, and I try to bring that out again. I don't demean my opponent as a deputy DA, but, I look at it this way. Years and years ago, the most senior judge on the bench still, David Gill. I'll make him mad if he heard this. I think he's 85 plus years old. I mean, he's still probably trying more cases than anybody. He
Really?
just keeps going.
Wow.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so Judge Gill used to, I assume he still does it, but did the Eagle Scout Board of Reviews for one of the districts here of the Boy Scouts. And as he used to say, to know him is to be on one of his boards. And he knew that I was a Navy pilot. Okay, you're going to be on my Navy pilot board and lawyer board. So I'd get a call. You got to come in for this young man applying to be an Eagle Scout, and they got to go through their board of review. So that's a lot of things I did, but I tried cases in front of him and on and on and on. So, God, where was I even going with this? I spun off on the Eagle Scout thing, and I completely lost my train of thought, which shows that I'm
We're
human.
having too much fun here.
Yeah, it's I don't know where I was going with that. It probably couldn't have been too important. So but getting back to, I mean, all of these people, it means a lot to me after all of those years to have, and I say this to anyone who comes as, oh yeah, I'll be delighted to endorse you. And I'm like, that's more than just words. I really appreciate that at my core, because it means that you're backing what I'm standing for. And that's, I don't take that lightly, not from anyone, not from any organization. I wrote that to the Lawyers Club that, it's more than just an honor. It's not like, okay, great, checking the block. I mean, that means a lot to me. I try to remain, and hope I can promise I will remain humble. If I were to be elected, I like to think I'm humble now. But I never want to lose sight of the fact that you put on this robe. It's not some magical, gift here that makes you smarter or more important than anyone. It's just a role to fill, an important role. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to forget not only where I come from, but all of these things I've done and the people that have meant to me, because I think that's what would make a good judge. I guess that's as simple as that. And that's what I would want to see in a judge. And I've seen a lot all over the state, up and down. And there are some who are outstanding, many of them. There are some who I want to say, why don't you just take the robe off and go home? Because you clearly are not enjoying this position.
Yeah.
I mean, they're either testy or arrogant or think they know more than everyone in the courtroom, want to prove it. And I just don't understand that mentality. I never have. Maybe that's part of why I felt the need to run, is, because I won't be like that. I mean, I want lawyers to lawyer. I mean, help me make a decision that's right by doing your job. And I'm not going to sit there and become, the super prosecutor to, what, I'll just handle this case for you and tell you how to do it, or the defense lawyer and tell you how to do it. The answer is you do that job. That's what the system is. It's an adversarial system. We can debate whether that's good or bad, but it is what it is. We have decided a long time ago that the best way to get to the truth is through the adversarial system of two sides of well-trained lawyers grilling the witnesses to reveal the truth for 12 people to figure out. I mean, that's the purity of our jury trial system. And I loved it. I've loved it all these years. And, I want to keep it going. And that's why I worry about, cracks in the foundation that I begin to see. So anyway, I feel like I've talked your ear off.
No, this is good. I mean, I think hopefully our audiences enjoyed this.
We put them all to sleep. They're
No,
gone.
we're actually at 2 hours and 53
Oh my!
minutes. Yeah, see right up there on the screen. So anyways,
Wow.
thanks. I mean, hopefully you're going to still make your appointment at the
Oh
VFW.
yeah, no, we're good. We're good in that regard. I'm just thinking, wow, how
See, time flies when you're having fun.
it does, and believe me, this has been all my pleasure. But I think, golly, how do I break that down? I can't, get little snippets there. Nobody, someone will look at that and go, well, I'm not watching that for 250.
What I do is lately I've been doing better at this. I split them into little snippets.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
I'll probably break them down by question or by topic.
Oh, that's perfect.
And then they're like more bite sized, but
yes,
but the bite sizes are still big bites.
yeah. Like I said, I'm not.
No,
what I'm trying to do is get out all my talking now, because I truly believe that the most important attribute amongst everything else of a judge is being able to listen.
Yes.
Because, again, it's not a story. It's just a fact, a fun fact. a legitimate study came out, I think it's out of Johns Hopkins. And it was a psychologist that did this, but looked at, the criminal justice system in this form. And they took low-level crimes. I assume they're like either traffic infractions or something like that. But they divided everyone into, took this group of people, the study group, and divided them into three. The first group would plead not guilty. And I mean, this is what they decided to do. And then they told them later how this would work. You go plead not guilty, and your case will be dismissed. Okay, bonus.
Yeah.
Next group, you plead guilty, and whatever happens, happens. Whatever the judge says, you're fine, or et cetera. The third group would plead not guilty and, go to trial or whatever. And so then the question was, they then asked the three about their perception of the fairness of the justice system. What do you think was the least amongst the three groups? Who thought who weighted lowest on the fairness realm?
Well, probably the ones that got off, right? They
exactly.
They pleaded innocent and then no trial.
Right. And they just said, okay, you can go.
Right, because they just realized it's all a farce.
Yeah.
In that example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And it's but the ones that rated the system the best as far as fairness were which one?
I assume the ones that went to trial, because then they got to see it play out.
Yeah. And the answer is that the ones that pled guilty and then got to tell the court what happened.
Right.
So maybe that's kind of a hybrid, if you will, because they felt that at least they got to have their story told. And
someone was listening.
And someone actually listened.
Heard.
They were heard.
Yeah.
And the whole, of course, point of that is, and maybe if done its best way is a trial. And I don't know if it was not guilty and they were given options. I don't know if it went to trial, but I mean, I'm certainly screwing up the true study because I think it was a little cleaner than what I laid it out to. But the takeaway, of course, is what you've hit on, is what matters most to people is to feel like they've been heard. They'll live with the consequences. Just feel like I didn't get railroaded or you didn't just slough it off. It's here's the story about my situation, because courts, which I love about them, this is all real life. None of this is TV made up stuff. Until we start putting, the live camera thing for, Crime and Punishment or whatever story. But seriously, I mean, this is real life stuff, real people whose lives are gone through whatever's going on. And most people just want the opportunity to say, but Your Honor, here's what happened. Okay.
Yeah.
And they'll live with the consequences. They just want to feel like they've been heard and someone listened and took into account whatever it is their position. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us, certainly any of us who presume to be a judge, and notwithstanding congested courts, ridiculous calendars, like how do you even get through these cases? I mean, that's the tension I'm prepared to wrestle with, is I got to get through a calendar here, but I can't ever miss the fact that every one of these people may only be in this court one time in their life.
Right.
And I've got to do my best to make sure they walk out going, well, I didn't like that debate, that fine, but you know what? That was fair. I mean, I felt like I got to say my side, and I can live with that.
And they know the truth.
And they know the truth. Absolutely. But they want
Yeah.
to tell their story.
Yeah.
They don't want it reduced down to, how many times I've watched, like a plea being taken. Of course, you got the lawyer who's, my client, and they're like, sir, do not speak. You need to talk to your lawyer. But what you see in that is, I just want this judge to know. And of course, sometimes you got to be careful. You might say things that actually hurt you. So you've got a lawyer, talk to them before you get up there and say anything. But what you see in that, in my mind, is, is the recognition. Too many of us in the system just see these huge numbers and forget that every number is a real life. And I don't care if it's traffic court, small claims. I mean, these people to them, it's the most important thing in the world right now.
Right.
And they just want to be heard. And that gets harder the more congested we get, which goes back to your, we do need more judges, more courtrooms. This county has grown immensely since those numbers that we are still stuck with.
I mean,
so at some point, real justice is being sacrificed. Access to justice is. If we can't give people at least sufficient time. I mean, look, any one of us could walk in, you get someone like me, they're going to talk for 2 hours. Like, wow, that's not going to work. But I mean, they've got to be given, and you've got to find a way to go, look, I want you to make your point. I'm going to give you, and find the, the way so that they can have their piece been said. And if we do that, if we can do that, that's what I think real success is people feel like, the courts work. I got to say my piece, and I'm okay with the result. I think in most cases, the vast majority of people will be okay with that.
Right. I agree with you.
Yeah. It's
everyone deserves their day in court, as they say.
They do. They do. I mean, that's not just a phrase. I mean, it has real life to it. I mean, if you're facing, a civil lawsuit or a crime, or you have a family situation, I mean, you want your day in court. And some people don't want their day. They just want it to go away. And I get that. But at the end, I've always said, if there's anything we do, and it is no more and no less than solve problems.
Right.
That's what we're here for. And a judge is another one to facilitate the solving of those problems. I mean, everything else gets caught up in the machinery of whatever system we have.
That's an interesting way to think of it.
But it's about problem solving.
Yeah.
There's no reason for it to exist elsewise.
Correct. Yeah.
None. If we have no problems, there's no need for court. So once we get rid of all the problems, we'll all go and retire. But even with crime, I mean, crime is a problem. I mean, when someone commits a theft, you've taken something you don't own from someone else. That's a problem. How are we going to resolve that?
Right.
I mean, so crime in its essence is no different than any other issue that might end up before the court. So anyway, again, I feel like I'm overstaying my welcome.
It's all good. No, you're not at all.
Okay.
But we've gone for 3 hours. So
Yeah,
that's good.
I figured, okay, I'm looking to break a record here.
Yeah, it's all right. No, actually, the world record for the John Riley Project was one of the candidates for Poway City Council. Was John Carson.
Oh,
he and I, this is in 2018. We were here for 3.5 hours.
Wow.
But we talked about Poway stuff. We talked about baseball. We talked about rock and roll. We talked about everything.
Wow.
And we had a fun time.
Well, that's good.
That's the beauty of this podcast, is that there is no time limit. And we can talk as long as we feel like talking. And as long as people want to enjoy watching or listening, they can.
Yeah. Check out.
And people have done that. They'll check in, check out.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, other people will see the recorded versions, or they'll listen to the recorded version. And we're going to break up the video into little chunks. And so hopefully not just those that enjoyed the live stream today, but many others will enjoy the recorded version up through the middle of May when they make their important decisions.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on all of that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. Then if, you break it up, because people, I think, would be daunted to look at 3 hours.
Yeah, they don't want to hit the play button, because then
it's like, oh my
so,
gosh.
but we'll break them into like some chunks, like 10-minute pieces, 15-minute pieces.
Oh, beautiful.
So it'll all work out just right.
Yeah. Well, I'll find a way if you share that with me, because I'll put it out there and make sure everyone knows this is on the John Riley Project.
Yeah, when it'll be on YouTube. So yeah, I'll give you the links when we're all done.
Excellent, because I really meant it. I think what you do here is enormous. I want it to keep growing. It is a communication with the community, and I love that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a lot of fun, this project. I meet a lot of interesting people. You and I knew each other from before.
Yes.
But I've met a lot of new people that have become my friends, like Pete Neal, who's been here on the podcast.
Yeah, I've seen him.
And,
I've seen a few of his.
And a lot of other folks. So it's a great project. And there's not enough of this sort of conversation at a local level.
Right.
There's not enough long form conversation. And I think it ultimately serves as sort of like a public forum, a community forum.
Yeah,
that's really healthy, I think.
Very healthy. It's, and I understand people have short attention spans. We maybe have been driven that way by social media, but it's, when I go to some of these events and they're like, okay, you have 3 minutes. I'm like, 3 minutes? I barely introduced myself. But you find a way and scream out a bunch of stuff, and, so be it. But it's, I'll never forget. I won't. I'll tell that deputy city attorneys had a Zoom call, with all the candidates. I assume all. They invited us all, but it was all on Zoom. So you get up and it's just a little box you're looking in, and we give you. I think they said 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I'm like, okay, I don't know what we're really going to accomplish here in 2 or 3 minutes, but say whatever you want to say, and then move, and then thank you, you're done. Like, wow, okay, bye.
What do you choose to emphasize when you're only given 2 minutes?
I try to focus, like any public speaker, on my audience, who I'm in front of, and trying to touch. Some of it is kind of automatic, like you're running for judge, so it starts with, well, what are you doing? Okay, name, what seat I'm running for, and the proverbial, so why do you want to be a judge mode, and why are you qualified? Well, I mean, my little resume, that that's hard to get through in 2 to 3 minutes. But then to go and touch on something, depending on the time you have, on something that's important to that group. I'm not just making it up. There are things I believe, but it's a question of what issue do I think they might be particularly focused on. So deputy city attorneys, 2 things that I thought were important for them, just as an example. I don't mean to, hit on them, but the city of San Diego, city attorney's office. So Mara Elliott's office, but this is their association, and they've got quite a few lawyers, and they do both criminal and civil. But most people in prosecution, the city attorney does misdemeanor crimes in San Diego, which is true. That's their criminal division, but they have a whole nother group, a division doing civil work, that represent the city in lawsuits and, all kinds of things, whether it be real estate development issues, the Ash Street thing, those will be city attorneys. So I tried to at least let them understand that not only do I have background in both criminal and civil, but I realize your office has whoever I'm talking to here, because they're all black boxes. So they're not just misdemeanor deputies. There are civil lawyers out there too. And, I have an understanding of that. That I hope is of some benefit to folks like you. And then to even speak to the criminal lawyers who are all doing misdemeanors, is to go, it's so easy, especially as a DA, you're like, okay, homicides, rapes, major felonies, that's what we're about, gang, stuff. And that seems to be where you percolate up to. But, I did a bunch of misdemeanors. Of course, we all did as DAs. In outline portion. So I did most of my misdemeanor work in the South Bay. In fact, my trial team leader back then, when I first did my first jury trials, DUIs and assault, simple assault cases, my trial team leader was none other than Summer Steffen.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've known Summer for 30 years, and think the world of her, by the way. And I think the feeling is mutual. She needs to, I think I indicated, needs to be neutral here, given she's got a deputy DA in the race, but I guess I would say anyone who wants to know what she thinks of me, give her a call. We've known each other a long time. But with the criminal attorneys, what I want them to know is I get that what you're doing is important. I'm not just, DA, like, low level misdemeanor. I did that when I was a young deputy. Now I'm a real trial lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're actually doing trials that, quite frankly, are some of the most difficult trials we have. When I had a homicide case, I got a dead body. That's going to get shown in one form or another. A jury's going to say, okay, someone's dead. Someone committed a crime here. I mean, we're pretty far down the path of now have a DV case where there's conflicting testimony. There's no real injury, allegation of a slap or a kick or whatever, and try to win that beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's the he said, she said.
It
stuff,
is.
and that's hard.
It is. Those are tough trials.
Yeah.
And I get that. And that's why I wanted them to know that I know that I'm not going to give misdemeanors short shrift, because you're working your tail off to prove your case. And the same for the defense lawyer and the misdemeanor side. That as a judge, if I'm sitting in, presiding over a misdemeanor trial and you're handling it, I get that. I know how hard those can be. Doing a DUI that may seem kind of clear, except it comes out, and I had one of these, that the young sailor who wanted to be a SEAL, and he got on the stand, he testified in an effort to show why he couldn't have drank as much as they thought he was drinking, is because he was about to, commence BUDS training, and he knew that this would throw his whole dream away.
Yeah.
And, regardless of what the facts show, I got a couple of, people in that jury going, oh my God, am I really going to take away this kid's dream for one mistake? And of course, trying to get them over that. It's not like, well, someone's dead here. No, he drove home and he got pulled over. No harm, no foul, really. Forget, put aside, we all know the dangers of DUI and all that. But here's a guy, nothing bad happened, and he's going to lose his life's dream, and trying to convince the jury to get beyond that and just rule on the, I mean, that's tough.
It is.
And I get it. I get it. And so that's what I would try to talk to them real quick about my experiences in that on both sides, the misdemeanor criminal trials and the civil work, that I get it. And
that's tough. You're right. It is hard.
It is hard. It's much harder than, and I've said that to them. I mean, I have, in a different phrase, I've talked about, I've done enough of, I've done homicide, I've done elder abuse, serious elder abuse cases, and insurance fraud. I said, I'll tell you, difficulties, walk into a jury trial with the client is, I don't want to pick on anyone, Geico Insurance, because someone defrauded the insurance company. Okay. And you got jurors going, oh, the insurance company? Yeah, we're going to really lose a lot of tears for them.
Yeah. And
And then roll into an elder abuse case where the victim is being rolled in a wheelchair. I've won already.
Yeah, right.
I've almost.
Yeah.
It's understanding, you deal with whatever case you've got. Some have natural affinities, like I said, a murder case, people see a dead body. I mean, and if you're a defense lawyer, the difficulty there is getting past, I get it. This is horrific. Someone died, but it wasn't my client. And you can't just jump to conclusions and convict my client of this incredible offense unless there's sufficient evidence.
Right.
Notwithstanding how hard this is, I had a case, one murder case with my two witnesses, and one of them ended up not even being a witness because she wouldn't talk. Was I think I have this 6 and 8 or 8 and 10, 6 and 8 year old kids of the mother.
Oh,
shot dead in her front door.
Oh,
yeah, by a woman who was going through modeling school at John Robert Powers, modeling. But she had some gang connection. This was not a per se gang case. And apparently was in a neighborhood where people, get territorial, all this. Someone parked in someone's parking space and that led to being disrespected in one form or another. And this woman came to the door. I was going to say allegedly, but she's now still in prison, having been convicted, came to the door, knocked on it. The 10-year-old or 8-year-old boy answered the door, and she just said, "Go get your mommy." He walked away, and the mom and the little girl walked out, and the mom got, within the door, 357 Magnum, 2 rounds to the chest.
Oh,
yeah. And then she left. So the little girl who saw it, I mean, I couldn't get her to say her name. I mean, she was 6.
well, yeah.
I mean, but I had to put her on the stand. And believe me, my most difficult decision in that case was, could I actually put these kids on the stand? I mean, they've already been traumatized.
Yeah.
But I can't prove this case without them.
Right.
I mean, because if I don't even call them, I can't get up and say, I would call the kids, but that'd be hard. You can't do that. It's, where are the kids? Then the jury starts saying, maybe they saw something the prosecutor doesn't want you to hear or something like that. So you almost got to go through the drill, but it's not easy, because I knew that, the new trauma I'm putting these little kids through. And this little girl couldn't say a word. And so then we excused her. And for my strategic purposes, it did what I had it to do, which is, I get it. She's there and she's so traumatized she can't even speak. That's what the jury needed to know. It still pained me. I was able to get her aunt to sit in the courtroom with her during, so we did some things to try to alleviate it. But, that's still I mean, this is got to be 20 years ago, more. It still sits with me. And the little boy came in, and he too was, similar, but he's, I had to get him to testify. Was this the same woman who knocked on that door that day? And, we talked, I did a little roundabout with him, talking about how the day and what he was doing. He was with his father, and then he came in the house. The father was still in the garage. And it came up to that point where I said, and then, did you answer the door? Yes. Someone knocked on the door. And, you can tell he's getting more and more quiet. Yes. I said, do you see her in the courtroom today? And he kind of glanced and he wouldn't answer. And so I asked him again, and he did kind of the same thing. And then I walked over and positioned myself in the well, because I'm allowed to move, between him and the defendant, so he couldn't see her. He could only see me.
Right.
And I said, it's okay. Do you see her in the courtroom? And then I think I even had to do it again. They had this even on the TV. And I said, son, it's okay. If you see her today, simply point her out for the judge and this jury. And he kind of picked up his hand. She's just sitting right behind you. That's Mara. And, his aunt gasped in the courtroom.
Yeah,
I mean, it was, and I come away from that going, again, I'm pained with, I hope my takeaway, maybe I'm kind of, making myself feel better, is that he felt like he had some role in vindicating his mom. I hope. I mean, but I never whisked him off the stand right after that. And even that, we had other evidence that needed to come in, and it was a 6-week homicide trial. But, this is where I go back to, these courts are real life, real stuff, real emotions, real people. And it doesn't end when they walk out of the courtroom. This is their life. And, that's the beauty of it and the intensity of it in all of that. It's not a TV show that ends at, 10 o'clock, I mean, so it's, there are times, and you finish something like that. I mean, even Anne back then, the kids were little, she knew when I was starting that trial, magically a trip to go visit her mom and to Seattle came up. I'm taking the kids, we're going to Seattle. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's probably a good idea, because I'm out of commission from, from beginning to end. I mean, I'm in the office, I come home, sleep, get up, go right back.
You're just immersed in it.
Yeah. It's all you think about. And it's a bit of a young person's game. I mean, you do that for years and years. I mean, there reaches a point where I can only do so many. 1 year I did 16 trials in 1 year. I mean, it was, all felony trials. I mean, I couldn't do that again. I mean, I got to the point to the end of the AG's term where 1 or 2 a year was plenty for me.
That's intense.
Yeah. It's, you can only go that long and be effective. I mean, God bless some of these folks who are, career prosecutors and defense lawyers are still doing, maybe not quite those numbers, but doing, the public defender in particular. I mean, they just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and largely losing most of the time.
Right.
I mean, as a defense lawyer, having had a guilty verdict in a case, that was another 6-week trial against this guy, Bill Mitchell. He was the number 2 up in Riverside, big fraud case that my client was insistent, he fired his first lawyer, and then they came to know of me and called me in to try. He wanted to go to trial. And so we went into this case, very convoluted. It was all about understanding how the community college system works in its funding through what we call full-time equivalent student hours. And that's how they get funding. Well, what they did is they ran, there was a police academy. And by the way, my client was a vice president of Riverside Community College at the time. Well, the police academy is there through the CHP. Well, he and 2 partners, all 3 of them are former sheriff's deputies, so they have that background. And they came up with this great idea, is if when they're going through the academy, they can basically just fill up this paperwork, which were nothing more than like evals, like, oh, was this course good? Yeah, sign your name, boom. And then they submitted it to Palavar Community College out in the desert, and they got an associate's degree on top of finishing the academy for nothing more than filling out this paperwork.
And so their attendance numbers went up.
And these guys got paid a percentage of all the equivalent student hours that were going to the funding that was going to Palavar Community College. Because for every credit that they're getting paid. They're getting funding from the state.
Right.
And then these guys were paid their consulting fee.
Oh, wow.
And so as I said to him, look, at the end of the day, here's what the jury's going to hear. You're currently being paid and salaried well by the community college, and you ran this little thing on the side and made $1 million of government money in a year. And he did. I said, we're in trouble from day one. I don't care how many dances I do, how many ways I try to spin that, technically all they're hearing is, and you got an extra $1 million of government money on top of it all for doing nothing more than having your 2 guys go here, sign the paper, and half the time it wasn't even filled out correctly. So that's what we dealt with. And I said to him, so I end up with this Bill Mitchell, who's number 2 under Rod Pacheco, was the DA up there. Bill was at the time in charge of the whole Indio division, which is the largest part of Riverside. But he held on to this case because those other 2, we had a 3 defendant case. Well, he's decided, I'm not going to pass this off. And he's a stand-up guy, is probably the most noted prosecutor handling no body murder cases. A murder case where they never find the body.
Wow, that's a skill.
He's got more experience doing that than anybody, certainly in the state of California. But he held on to this big fraud case. And so I come into the case when they've been dealing with it for a year and a half, trying to resolve it, whatever. And I get called because they're telling him, you got to plead this out. And he got all ticked off at his defense lawyer. And I got a call. Someone said, I referred your name to this guy because I was doing the work up in Riverside. So I go up there and he wants to hire me. And I said, fine. And he's like, I said, you want to try this case? Then we can try it. I am a trial lawyer. I can do that. I said, this is a difficult case. I mean, I think I laid that out. I said, from day one, we got grand jury transcripts. We've got all this stuff. We can lay all this out. But at the end of the day, you made $1 million on top of your salary for really doing nothing more. And it's all government money too.
Right.
I said, that's a huge hurdle. And it's going to be very tough to get over. And so we end up going in. Both of those guys ended up pleading out and testifying against him. So it got even worse now. He
dug his heels.
He dug in his heels. The night I think we were going into trial, this guy, Bill Mitchell, said, look, I can make this offer. That's it. And so I tell him, because I have to, I said, here's what Mr. Mitchell has offered. To plead to this count, you can get it ultimately reduced to a misdemeanor, blah, blah, blah. And he said, so you think I need to plead? I said, I didn't say that. I said, you hired me to try this case. And you fired your last guy simply because he told you you should plead. I said, here's what I'll tell you. This deal offer is not only as good as it's going to get, it's as good an offer as I would have ever envisioned in this case. I mean, if I'd come in cold, I'd say that's as good as it could ever get. And he said, so you're saying I should plea? I said, no, that's your decision. I said, you hired me. I'm not going to convince you to plea because you specifically hired me to try it. You have to decide whether I've told you how difficult this is going to be. And he said to me, he said, Pete, I just don't think what we did constituted this crime. And I went back and forth with him, and well, this is how they're going to prove it, and this is what they're going to lay out. And he said, I think a jury will see through this. I said, okay, I've done enough of these to think that's a far cry. He said, so you do think I should plea? I said, I'll say it again. I mean, these are until you sit down, and I remember it like it was yesterday in a little restaurant. With my client who's literally looking with feeling like his life is on the line. And to some degree it was. Everything he was doing. Is a big member of a large Christian church and had a lot of following, a lot of support, was a well-liked guy. He knew he'd, if he got convicted especially of a felony, and it would have been a felony, he's going to lose his real estate license, which is what he was now doing, and on and on and on. So, I get it. And you're sitting there, right? What
happened?
So I told him that, and he said, Pete, if this jury convicts me, at least 10 years from now, I can still look at my son and tell him I wouldn't admit to something I didn't think I did. And that's most important. I said, well, I think you've answered the question.
Mm-hmm.
Swear the jury. And 6 weeks of trial later, he was convicted.
Mm.
And, and it ended up being worse because he got convicted of pretty much everything. But part of the story is this Bill Mitchell and I went at it for 6 weeks. Very good trial lawyer. I'd like to think I can hold my own, but he had a strong case, and we contested it I contested him on everything. Motions, you name it. Fast forward years and years later, I now have lunch with Bill regularly. He's endorsed me. He's my,
nice.
My point is, when I tell lawyers about this is, you can fight like no tomorrow for your client, but the civility thing has to still be there.
Of course.
And good lawyers don't get caught up in the nuances of their cases. And that's my example is I don't think I'd tried a more testy case back and forth for 6 weeks with anyone. And to this day, we're, really close. The epilogue is he got convicted. We go to sentencing. Mitchell was hell-bent on, I want 8 to 10 years in prison. And I brought in a slew of his supporters, preachers in sentencing, and I got him probation.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And so Mitchell likes to say, yeah, I won the war, or no, I won the battle. You won the war.
Yeah. In the end, your client got a favorable outcome.
He did, when all's said and done. He has a felony conviction that won't go away, but I think he's now, because time has passed, I know he's got his real estate license back because he's back selling real estate in Riverside County. I'm sure he's doing fine.
Story.
Yeah. But you live.
Did he have to give back the money?
Oh yeah. Because they had liened his house and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So he probably had part of that reduced to a civil judgment that they'll collect on. And they'll get their money back over time. But, he got what he wanted. I only took about 10 years out of my life. But, I felt like I did what I needed to do. Is my client wanted the process, and he didn't want me to, convince him to plead guilty. He didn't want some threat. If anyone was going to say he was guilty, he wanted 12 people from the community to say so.
Okay.
And they did. And he could live with that. And yes, the epilogue to the epilogue, he's stupid. When he gets, because he was ordered to be some 6 months in jail, but because I knew they were so impacted at the time that he was going to get kicked out pretty soon. Well, he's also a former Riverside Sheriff's deputy, so they're not going to put him in jail in Riverside. So that where do they send him? Well, they have a joint agreement with Big Bear. Bear Lake. There's a little sheriff's station up there. That's San Bernardino County.
Right.
So he was sentenced. He was sentenced for his 6 months that might last, a month, 2 months before he gets the early kick up at Big Bear. And up at Big Bear, they have sort of a jail, and in the morning they kick you out. Go, okay, go out, and you just hang out in the court it's right there on the main drag. You wouldn't even know it.
Really?
There's picnic tables and stuff up, and you just sat out there and hang out. And I'm like, Bill, you're just going to have to, and his wife could come up and visit him. I mean, for the brief period, I said, just lay low. They have a few rules, one of which is no cell phones. And one of the times, unbeknownst to me, I wasn't there, of course. I did visit him up there because I have a home up there. So I go by and there's Bill sitting out on the picnic table. It's right on the main drag. I think they've added a fence now. That wasn't even there before. Because these are, non-serious offenders. And there's only like half a dozen, maybe, people there. So
can you pull over and talk to him?
You could, but the deputies come out and you can't come in here.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and they are told you're not to go out and communicate with the public. I mean, you can hang out here, talk amongst yourselves, or have visitors. And that's why I think they eventually put a fence up. It's just a cyclone fence around that little property, but you'll see it if you ever drive down Big Bear. But he had his wife up, and at one point, I don't know if it was his son's birthday or whatever, she passed his phone to him.
Uh-oh.
He gets on the phone to say happy birthday or hello or whatever. Well, they catch him with it. Next thing I know, your client's being transferred down to Central Valley, which is, and because he's a deputy sheriff, in administrative segregation.
Oh, so solitary
in a nasty prison. I mean, this is a nasty jail. These are usually holding.
And he was at a resort.
He was at Kickback City.
Yeah.
And I go, oh my God, the phone. You couldn't wait a month. Send a note.
Well, not only is he foolish, so is his wife.
Well, absolutely. Took that case up on appeal, because he wanted to. I knew he wouldn't win. We made some good arguments, I thought. But in the process, and now I'm doing other things like working with the assistant sheriff, who was a female of Riverside, who was telling me that, look, I said, I thought we could get him out of here. I thought they were going to kick. Now he's in ADSEC. This. She's like, I hear you, but there's some politics at play here. And we went dancing back and forth. And there's a system where you can log on and, basically you'll get a text alert from the jail saying so-and-so has been released. You could do that for anybody you wanted to. Who does that mostly? Your victims want to know if their rapist gets released or something.
Yeah.
And so I just put myself on that and just to be on, so I'd know, because now I'm like, my God, what if they move him? Because they'll tell you that too. And we're going back and forth, and his wife's calling me crying. I can't even get into see him because there's limited visiting hours, on and on. And I've tried this. Now I'm calling her. I've written letters, and I'm telling her, I don't know. They're telling me you're just going to have to be patient. And then the next day, boom, your client's released.
Oh,
I'm like, and she called me up. Oh my God, I just got a call. I said, go get him.
Yeah.
And he was out. I mean, so I don't know how much time between Big Bear and then he might have been another month in that nasty ass. And I went up and visited him there. It's awful because now we're behind. He's in a little alcove, bulletproof glass. Yeah, I can hardly hear him. It's awful. But a month and a half that he spent there, and then he got this kick. But there was something going on with the sheriff's department. Somebody was ticked off because they knew him and didn't like what happened, and they didn't want to allow the early release. There was just this behind the scenes stuff that should have no play, but it does.
Right.
But out he went. But so Mitchell and I still talk about that case to this day.
Oh yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah, it's. I think that was he's continued to try. Then he ended up down because Rob Pacheco lost in the next election, and Bill, because he was the number 2 in the office. He was now in an appointed position. Guess what? He just lost his job.
Oh, he did.
Well, when Pacheco lost, Bill, as an appointed assistant DA, gets the boot by the new DA. Says, sorry, I'm cleaning the house. The top positions are gone.
Oh.
You're no longer a deputy DA with the protections. You're at will. See you later. Bye. And so he's out of a job. Bonnie, he was lecturing. Bonnie DeMonis at the time was the DA, said, why don't you come down here? We can get a contract position for you, which he did. And I mean, again, that's probably now 14, 15 years ago. He went down there, did some contract, and they hired him on full time, and now he's literally the chief of the largest division the DA has, North County.
Wow.
Yeah, he's their chief, and has been there for quite a while. He's well regarded, and he's a great trial lawyer and all. But so he's the most low key guy. I mean, aren't you gonna retire? No, I'm still feeling like I'm doing some good stuff. So
yeah,
I'm like, God bless you, buddy.
Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, you get me going, John.
I know you're going. But where are we now? We're at 3. Actually, we may have just set a new record.
Well, you know what? As long as we're close, we're going for it. Right?
So it's 3 hours and 33 minutes right there. We've been going on the live stream.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I probably should move onward and upward. And what time is it exactly?
Bottom
my
right
watch
corner,
stopped
5:53.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not due there for another hour, so
so we can go for 50 more minutes.
Okay. I think I'll hit the floor first.
Yeah, me too. But this has been great.
It is a blast. I can't thank you enough. This is certainly for me personally, it's awesome, but I really do believe I'd like to figure out how we can keep finding a way to elevate this. There is no reason why with you here that every city council, and I know you have city council candidates who have come in, and now I think it's kind of like, you got to go talk to John Riley.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see, I don't know if you'd ever, and that becomes a whole different ballgame, really outside even yours, but I'm thinking like a debate, if there ever was one between city council.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be fun. I would be happy to moderate it.
Yeah. With Brian Pepin. I've gotten to know Brian pretty well, and I know who is it? Hiram Soto. And I know you've had him on here.
No, he's chimed in on the live stream.
Okay.
And then Pete Neal met with Hiram. But I had a cup of coffee with Brian a number of months ago. He's a good guy,
Yeah.
And so is Hiram.
Right. So to have those two, try to have someone like you would be a great moderator and kind of facilitator to have a discussion about the issues that matter out here.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of these, this is what I just keep seeing. People, as I say to people, if I can reach people and then beg them to, if they're at all inclined, to then reach out to their networks. And even then, I know the vast majority of people are like, I didn't even know you were running. And I'm going as fast as I can, trying to talk as many people as I can. But you begin to realize, my God, this county's big. And there's huge. A lot of people. And what just pains me is people go, you know what? I see a name and I see a 3-letter designator, because that's or 3-word, which is the ballot designation, which is what you're limited to.
Right.
And it has to be your current position or what you've done in the last full calendar year. So I can't put, in fact, some judges even suggested to me, I think you'd still qualify to write deputy attorney general. And I said, I'm just not comfortable writing that when I'm not currently one right now. And that's only a few months removed, but I'm not doing that. So I've come up with chief trial counsel criminal trial prosecutor, because I did that for the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, name deputy district attorney. Oh, okay. That's people do that.
I'm sure they do.
That's worth votes. And I want to go, but as I say to people, good experience. I did all that. Plus, and as this friend Rear Admiral McGrath writes me, he goes, Pete, when I read the ballot statements, what Chris, that's his name, will sound like is what he'll be someday. Or no, you sound like what Chris might be someday if he keeps, working for a whole lot of time. And kind of like the big brother or whatever it is. And I go, Pat, if I knew that the vast majority of the people in this county read those ballot statements, I'd go, I'm okay. I just don't know that. I don't know how many will stop with name 3 words.
Some may not even, some vote and don't even get to the 3 words.
Don't even get to the 3 words.
They just go, oh, that guy sounds like a nice name.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, as I say to people, the 3 things that bother me most, the second worst is don't vote at all.
Right.
Because you're just giving away a vote. And
Right.
what you've really done is give other people a greater vote than you, because their vote is worth more.
Yeah.
If you don't vote,
proportionately more impactful.
exactly.
Mhm.
So that's, the second worst. But the really worst is what I call the Del Mar racetrack mode. I'll just bet on the color, red, green, blue. I'll pick a name. Oh, I knew a guy named Pete once. He was a jerk, so I'm not voting for him.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
Or they look at the party designation
and they won't see that.
Yeah.
Not designated anywhere in this.
Well, not in
race.
yours. It's not, because it's
Oh, that's right.
nonpartisan.
That's right. That they do that a lot, which also pains. So we've gotten to this and this, and never the twain shall meet.
Well, some states have that straight party vote,
Yes.
where you can just say, I'm just pick one of the parties, and then it goes
Pick one party,
right down the
all,
list.
all of it. Yeah.
Like one Chad punch and you're done.
Absolutely. And
That's
I mean,
crazy.
it is crazy, because we're, we've heard all the debates going back whether we should even allow all the citizens to vote because they're not smart enough. Maybe that's what the Electoral College was all about. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. And I just go, so just do a little bit.
Right.
Just a little bit. I know it takes time, but you'll get the little booklet. Just read it. It's not that long. 200 words. It's not that hard.
To me, this is what's amazing about our conversation, is because I never have seen this much information and content from someone running for judge.
No. And you won't,
because they're just so stealth.
Right.
And that's why it was always so confusing for me when I had to vote for judge. It was hard.
Right.
To figure out. And that's what I think is wonderful about our conversation, is we're giving people a chance to know you and know what your principles are, where you stand, how you see the world. Now people can make a really informed vote.
Well, at least, vis-a-vis me, if they either like or don't like me, the question is, really, you're going to have to pick somebody, or you choose not to vote. And so it's not just knowing one. And look, at the end of the day, people say, I don't really care. I know you, and that's where I'm going. Okay. I mean, that works for me. What, in the most ideal sense, read about all three.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And you decide then or get to know all three as best you can. That's a much harder pull, because not everyone has this opportunity. I'm sure you'd give an opportunity to anyone who, any of my opponents who want to come up here, but
it's a standing offer to every candidate.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's, and you look down the street, as you probably saw it just down the street from you, Rebecca Cantor has a sign up.
Oh yeah.
And you probably don't know anything about her. I'm not going to weigh in on that race. That's the other judicial seat.
Oh, so I was going to ask.
Yeah, she's not in my race.
Okay.
She's running against a gentleman, Mike Murphy, and who's a deputy attorney general, and Michael Fleming, who's a deputy public defender, and Rebecca is a U.S. attorney.
Oh.
And so now you know more than you knew before, which is who are even in that race.
Right.
But the question is, who is the best? I'm not going to weigh in, certainly not here on that. But there you have it. In mine, I mean, I tell you, it's a deputy district attorney with 14 years as law school deputy district attorney. I mean, when I left the DA's office, he was still in law school. So that's what he's done, and that's good experience. I have it, but it is what it is. The other is a traffic commissioner who handles traffic court. And he likes to say he wears the same robe as a Superior Court judge. And I thought, yeah, it's a little more. If you want a promotion, go ask the governor.
Yeah.
But, look, he does do important work, and he's a really nice man. I know him. But, that's what's in my race. And, I try to focus on me and what it represents. And, I think I touched on the one, why it's important that we get things right as a prosecutor and at each step, and following the rules and all that kind of stuff. So, as long as people look a little bit, I'm happy.
Well, we still got some comments coming in.
No way. They're probably like, I came back.
Okay, here it is. It says, Yuri says, I was just checking to watch the replay because I was at work. A new record, John. Mr. Murray, I am very impressed with you, sir. You have my vote. Okay, so we're getting there one notch
Yuri,
at a time.
I think I've gotten a second vote today. You're number 2, and that makes it all worth it.
But see, what record he's referring to is the the podcast length, because we're now at 3 hours and 42 minutes. That's the record.
Yes. Well, if I've got nothing else going for me, I've set the record at John Riley's, at least for now. I'm sure it'll be broken, and maybe you will come in and break it at some point.
And what does he say here? Yeah, John Carson. Yeah, it was John Carson. It was my guest.
Wow.
That day. It was in 2018. So, but all good.
Yeah, I hope that's a good thing, Yuri, when all's said and done. I wasn't here to break records, but hey, what the heck, you got to make your mark somehow.
Yeah, records are made to be broken.
Absolutely. And look, I don't know who's the fact that John has stayed with me this long, or I keep talking. Who knows?
Okay. Well, let's wrap it up.
Yes.
Okay. But you gave me a sign. I'll put it in my front yard. So
excellent.
All good.
All good. You know what? That means so much, because that means John Riley's on board, and that means your neighbors will know that. I hope that's a good thing.
No, it is.
I think it is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever. You just got to keep picking up those votes one at a time.
We just keep going until the clock strikes midnight. Whenever that may be.
On June 7th.
June 7th, technically, yes.
But everyone will mostly have their minds made up by mid-May.
I'm intrigued by, and I won't go on, but I'm intrigued just from the politics side of it, how this all plays out, with these universal mailed ballots. We will be able to track when people vote.
Right.
I have access to a system that will show me who hasn't voted yet, and by registered voters. So you'll get a sense of how quick people vote. Do they vote right away? Put it in the mail. Maybe they vote right away and it sits on their credenza waiting until June 7th and the hand deliver it. Who knows? And then the other side of it is voter turnout. What will that look like in a race that, let's face it, has very little interest? Not just my race. I mean, all of a sudden, this race is one that someone might, because no one's paying attention to anything else. Governor, no one's contesting him to speak of. Attorney General, there's a primary to see who will take on Rob Bonta.
There's senators running, right? Is it state senator or is
state
it
senator?
US senator?
Yeah, no, there's state senator, not U.S. senator. State senator, and state assembly, and there's a cast of thousands on. I don't know if it's quite that much, but these are primary votes or a primary voting session that I don't think will get an enormous amount of attention.
Right.
And so how low will that be versus every single person getting that vote? We saw a little bit of that because the first time they did it was in the governor's recall.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first actually in the 2020 election, and that was weird. The November election, that was mailed in because we were now in COVID. And then the governor recall was probably the first kind of insight to how responsive people are to but that's kind of a quirky vote all by itself.
Yeah.
So this will be the most, the first real normal process with everyone having a vote. Does that elevate voter turnout? People are like, well, I got a ballot, I'll vote.
I would assume it will, but maybe not as much as people think.
Intriguing to see is really the only reason I bring it up. If you just stand outside of it, you're not personally invested like me. It'll be interesting to see what the voter turnout looks like, how soon people vote. I mean, I hear, depending on who you listen to, some people, get it, mail it in right away, but then you got to track it because they might change your vote. So I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Others are saying, no, do not mail it in. You need to hold on to it till June 7th and then watch it placed into the box. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Do you really? I guess some people think they're.
I take what I've been doing lately is I have a business personal mailbox at the postal annex next to Target in Poway. And then the registrar of voters has one of their red voter boxes there and a representative from the registrar of voters. And so I just drop it in there. So it doesn't even go through the U.S. mail system.
No.
It goes right to the ROV.
And depending on certain groups you talk to, that's what they think is the best way to do it.
Yeah. And I'm not like paranoid about it. I just happen to go in there all the time. So I may as well just drop
convenient and you do it. Yeah. They've reduced polling places. So the days of going down, I don't know if you went there, if you had that, depending on how we used to go to Painted Rock. Did you go to Painted Rock?
No, I used to actually go around the corner to one of the retirement homes near the hospital.
Oh, okay.
But then they changed it and we had to go all the way down to St. Gabriel's Church.
Oh, wow.
because they changed the precinct boundaries and everything.
Yes.
And I, for the longest time, was always like to go and vote on the day of,
Me too.
because I just sort of like the process.
It's just the process. I like it.
But every year the lines were shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
Because everyone was voting by mail.
Right.
And then you'd hear the stories about people in, some other state waiting in line for 6 hours and in the heat, and they got to bring them water and food.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that is not at all what's going on here.
No, we never had that.
And again, well, no one checks your ID, although I don't care about that issue so much, but I know a lot of people do, but no one does.
No.
They just say, what's your name and what's your address? They go down the list. Oh, that's you. Okay, here you go.
Right. Then you had to sign.
You had to sign, and then you're done. So,
and they check those signatures.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some.
It's kind of like the designated hitter rule. Is that if I was a holdout wanting pitchers to hit because I like the process and the tradition and the pomp and circumstance of the ceremony. Now I'm like, I'm just going to evolve. I'm like, I'm in with the DH, and now I'm voting by mail.
I got it. That's how you're going. Yeah, I'm the same way. I liked going down to my little place at Painted Rock, and I think one year, for whatever reason, they moved it someone's home in the garage. I just like the feel of that, the little community thing. But I suspect this will, because I don't think they'll have a voting. They've reduced the polling places,
right?
So there'll only be kind of central ones
because they need them far less because so many vote by mail.
Yeah, so I suspect I'll be dropping it in the mail.
Yeah,
even though that's okay.
Okay, are we at 4 hours yet? No, not. But I think let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Okay. Good luck to you in your campaign. Let's stay in touch.
You know where to reach me.
All right, right on.
PeteForJudge.com.
That's it. PeteForJudge.com. Okay. Thanks a lot.
See y'all.
All right. So, and